The chamber smelled of polished cedar and lingering incense, a familiar comfort for Alara Vance. Her calloused fingers smoothed Prince Kaelin's silk tunic, placing it carefully on the chaise. Sunlight poured through the arched windows of Eldoria's royal palace, lighting dust motes dancing like golden secrets. Each morning she prepared his private world. She moved with quiet efficiency, her chestnut hair swaying. Alara's gaze rested on Kaelin's silver-backed brush. She remembered him as a boy, 10 years old, his dark hair wild from the practice yard. He would complain about brushing, but a mischievous glint was always in his gray eyes. She would gently coax him, her voice soft, ensuring he looked ready for lessons. Those memories were threads of a connection she cherished. The palace was a place of power, but for Alara, it was home, and Kaelin, her charge. She picked up a scroll, rolling it before placing it in the study alcove. The parchment smelled of ink and a faint metallic tang from kingdom affairs. Her life held humble duties, but her actions kept the palace running. She found dignity in that. Her sunstone brooch, pinned to her uniform, felt warm against her skin. It was her mother's, a small comfort from a life she barely remembered. Alara's blue eyes, usually downcast, held deep affection for Kaelin. She watched him grow into a charismatic young man. Fleeting glances across a hall or a shared smile made her heart quicken. She knew her place, a maid, yet her loyalty burned brighter than any ambition. She would do anything for Prince Kaelin. He was her prince, her world. Her hand polished the floor, a silent testament to her dedication. Every object in his chamber held a memory of Kaelin's life and her small part in it. Later that morning, Alara navigated the palace corridors, a low hum of hushed voices catching her ear. She carried fresh linens, their clean smell a contrast to the growing tension. The vast halls, usually bustling, held an unsettling quietness. Sunlight, once bright, now seemed colder, casting long shadows across tapestries of dragon lineage. Two lesser nobles, their voices barely whispers, stood near a statue of the first dragon rider. Their faces showed worry, replacing their usual haughty expressions. Alara paused, hidden behind a tall pillar, listening. "The king grows desperate," one man murmured, tracing runes on the statue. "Another dragon fell ill last night. Its scales, they say, were brittle as ice." The other noble shuddered. "And the bonds, the riders speak of a growing disconnect. The dragons themselves are losing their will." Ilara's heart lurched. Dragons were Eldoria's lifeblood, guardians of its strength. Their weakening threatened everything. Whispers of sluggish dragons, dimming fiery breath, and dull scales had intensified for weeks. This affliction defied remedies. "High Priestess Seraphina has been with His Majesty for hours," the first noble added. "She speaks of dark magic, of a hidden hand working against us." Alara's hands tightened around the linens. Dark magic? Sorcery? A shiver went down her spine. The palace, usually ordered, felt riddled with unseen dread. Kaelin's troubled expression from dinner a few nights ago came to mind. His gray eyes had been distant, his jaw tight. As the Dragon Prince, this news must weigh heavily on him. Her mind raced. Who would dare harm the dragons? Who would risk the kingdom's wrath? An enemy within, undermining their existence, sent cold dread through her. Her simple duties now seemed meaningless. The whispers faded as the nobles moved on. Alara stood there, her sunstone brooch a faint comfort against the chill of apprehension. Her world felt suddenly precarious. Evening fell, painting the palace windows in violet and gold. Alara had finished her duties, her body tired, but her mind still agitated. Her small servant quarters offered refuge, a humble space tucked away. The room held a cot, a small chest, and a flickering candle. The scent of damp earth and old stone filled the air. She had unpinned her sunstone brooch, placing it on her chest, when a thunderous bang shattered the quiet. The oak door splintered inward, ripped from its hinges. 3 royal guards, grim and unyielding, filled the doorway, their armor gleaming in the candlelight. Alara gasped, stumbling back, fear seizing her. She had never been confronted this way. "Alara Vance!" one guard boomed, his voice hard as stone. "You are under arrest." Her mind reeled. Arrest? For what? Her wide blue eyes darted between their stern faces, searching for an explanation. She had committed no crime. Her loyalty was absolute. "What is this?" she stammered, her voice a whisper, trembling. "I don't understand." The second guard stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. "You are accused of sorcery against the dragons, of weakening their bonds, of poisoning their spirit." The word struck her like a physical blow. Sorcery? Poisoning dragons? The accusation was monstrous. Her breath caught, nausea washing over her. Her calloused hands felt alien, tainted. "No," she whispered, shaking her head, tears stinging her eyes. "That's not true. I love the dragons." Her protest met indifference. The guards moved swiftly, heavy boots thudding. Rough hands seized her arms, twisting them behind her. Cold manacles clamped around her wrists. The sound a terrifying finality. The metal bit into her skin. Her sunstone brooch, clutched in her hand, slipped to the floor, rolling into the shadows. She barely noticed. Her small world shattered. Her room's safety, her life's predictability, vanished. The guards dragged her roughly from her quarters. The splintered door frame was a gaping wound. Cold night air whipped around her. The vast palace felt menacing. Alara was dragged through the echoing palace halls, her bare feet scraping stone. The rough grip on her arms was merciless. Her chest heaved with ragged breaths. The familiar tapestries now seemed to mock her, carvings twisted into accusing faces. Her blue eyes, swimming with tears, darted wildly, seeking reality. Servants and courtiers peered from doorways, their faces a mix of shock and disdain. Whispers, sharp and cruel, followed her. "The sorceress, a dragonbane." The words pierced her deeper than any physical blow. Suddenly, her heart stopped. Ahead, in the archway to the royal council chambers, stood Prince Kalen Thorn. He spoke with High Priestess Seraphina, her silver hair pulled back, dark robes flowing. Seraphina's sharp green eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Kalen, regal in his tunic, dark hair falling over his forehead, listened intently. His face held a familiar, troubled expression. For a split second, Alara's gaze locked with his. His gray eyes met hers across the brightly lit hall. A flicker of something, perhaps recognition, crossed his features. A desperate plea formed in her throat. He knew her loyalty. He would intervene, defend her against these lies. He had to. He was her prince. But then Kalen's expression hardened. His jaw tightened. His gaze, which held that fleeting connection, abruptly shifted. He looked away. He turned his back, a quiet, imperceptible movement, dismissing her. He continued his conversation with Seraphina, his voice low. This betrayal stole the very air from Alara's lungs. The world spun, the grand hall blurring with pain. The guards continued dragging her, their grip unwavering. His turning away was worse than any accusation, more painful than any physical torment. It shattered her deepest belief, crushing her faith in him. The prince she served saw her as a stranger, a criminal. The warm memories turned to ash. She was nothing to him. Profound grief washed over her, chilling her. Her loyal heart felt hollowed out. The journey through the palace seemed endless, a blur of condemning whispers and Kalen's indifference. They descended deeper, the air growing colder, heavier, smelling of damp earth and disuse. They reached a dark, narrow corridor, its walls rough-hewn stone. A heavy iron door stood at its end. With a final shove, Alara stumbled into the cold blackness of a dungeon cell. She landed awkwardly on the stone floor, the cold seeping into her bones. The guards, their duty done, stood impassive. One produced a massive, rusted key. The grinding protest of the lock mechanism echoed, a deafening finality. With a metallic shriek, the heavy iron door clanged shut. The sound resonated in the small, lightless space, sealing her fate. The last sliver of torchlight vanished, plunging her into absolute darkness. The air grew thick with damp earth, stagnant water, and her own fear. She was alone, terrifyingly alone. Her breath hitched. A raw sob tore from her. The rough stone walls pressed in. Her hands, still bound by icy manacles, trembled. Kalen's turned back burned behind her eyelids, a cruel, indelible brand. His betrayal was a wound deeper than any physical pain, a desolate emptiness in the prison's cold silence. Her name, Alara Vance, now carried the weight of a traitor. The dungeon air tasted of damp earth and forgotten misery, each breath a cold reminder of Alara's new reality. Her hands, calloused from years of service, trembled against the rough stone wall. Darkness pressed in, broken only by a sliver of faint light escaping the narrow grating high above. She pictured Prince Kalen's chambers, now so far away, the polished wood and soft lamplight, stark contrast to this suffocating gloom. She still could not truly believe she was here, accused of such a monstrous crime. Days blurred into an indistinguishable cycle of chill and hunger. Then the heavy iron door groaned open, spilling harsh torchlight into her cell. High Priestess Seraphina stood framed in the opening, her severe silver hair a stark crown against the gloom. She wore rich, dark robes that seemed to swallow the light, and her sharp green eyes moved with a chilling efficiency, assessing every inch of Alara. "So the loyal maid, Alara Vance." Seraphina's voice was calm, almost soothing, yet it held an edge of polished stone. "They say you have a way with secrets, especially those concerning the dragon bonds." Alara flinched, pulling herself further into the corner. She could smell the faint, cloying scent of Seraphina's incense, a stark contrast to the dungeon's stench. "I have no secrets." Alara's voice was a raw whisper, unused after days of silence. "I only serve the prince." Seraphina stepped closer, her silhouette casting a long, skeletal shadow across the cell floor. "Loyalty is a rare jewel, child, but even jewels can hide impurities." Her tone suggested false sympathy, a predatory softness. "Tell me, Alara, did you not once complain of the arduous duties caring for the dragons? The heat, the scales, the demanding nature of their needs?" Alara stared confused. "No, High Priestess, I loved the dragons. I saw to their comfort, brought them in their meals." Her brow furrowed, trying to understand the twisted direction of the conversation. "Their comfort was my duty, my honor." "Indeed," Seraphina murmured, circling slowly like a hawk observing its prey. "Duty, honor, words that can be bent, can they not? Perhaps you felt they took too much of the prince's attention, too much of your time away from him." Her green eyes bore into Alara, searching for a flicker of recognition, a sign of unwitting agreement. Alara shook her head, a dull ache beginning behind her eyes. "No, the prince always put the dragons first, as was right. They are the heart of Eldoria." She remembered Kalen's quiet devotion, the way his fingers would trace the scales of a young dragon hatchling. The memory felt like a phantom limb, a pain she could not quite locate. "Perhaps you thought you could help the prince," Seraphina suggested, her voice barely above a whisper, laced with an insidious insinuation. "Help him by easing the burden of these great beasts. A small potion in their drink, a subtle change to their feed. Nothing to harm, merely to soften them." A cold dread coiled in Alara's stomach. Seraphina was twisting every innocuous action, every simple thought, into something sinister. She felt a sudden, desperate urge to speak with Kalen, to explain, to make him understand that these were terrible lies. He would know, wouldn't he? He knew her heart. "I did nothing of the sort," Alara insisted, her voice gaining a fragile strength. "I would never harm them. I would never harm the prince." Seraphina merely smiled, a thin, knowing curve of her lips. "The heart can be a complicated thing, Alara. It can be swayed by affection, by jealousy, by the desire for something more." She paused, letting her words hang in the stale air. "Think on what you truly desired, and when I return, perhaps you will have a more complete recollection." With that, she turned, her robes rustling softly, and the heavy door clanged shut once more, plunging Alara back into chilling darkness. The silence that followed was heavier than before, filled with the echo of Seraphina's manipulative voice. Alara felt a growing nausea, a sickening realization that her words were being carefully rewoven into a narrative of guilt. She hugged her knees to her chest, trying to remember every innocent act, every kind word she had ever spoken about the dragons. Could they truly believe such a thing? A faint rustle of cloth, a soft clink of metal. Her heart leaped. "Guard?" she whispered, her voice cracking. A gruff, weary voice answered from the small slot in the door. "What do you want, girl?" "Please," Alara pleaded, her voice thick with desperation. I need to send a message to Prince Kalen. It's urgent. He needs to know what they are saying. She fumbled for the small, polished, sunstone brooch pinned to her tunic. It was a simple piece, given to her by her mother, her only personal possession. I have nothing else, but please, just a few words. The guard sighed, a long, drawn-out sound that spoke of endless shifts and thankless duties. What words? Tell him, tell him they accuse me of poisoning the dragons. Tell him I swear on my life I would never. Ask him to come to speak for me. He knows me. Her voice trembled with each syllable, the hope fragile as spun glass. There was a long pause, the guard's shadow visible through the slot. I cannot promise anything, girl. Messages to the prince are not for the likes of us. But then a slight softening in his tone. But I will try no guarantees. The slot clanged shut. Alara clung to that small thread of hope, picturing Kalen's face, his gray eyes, the way he would sometimes smile at her when no one else was looking. She knew he cared for her, had always treated her with a kindness that transcended their stations. He would surely intervene. He would see through Serafina's cruel machinations. He had to. Hours stretched into what felt like days, or perhaps entire weeks. The cold seeped into her bones and her stomach gnawed with a constant emptiness. Each creak of the door, each distant murmur, sent a jolt of anxious anticipation through her. But the door remained shut for her, and no one came with word from Kalen. The silence from him was deafening, a growing chasm in her heart. She found herself replaying every moment she had shared with him, the time he had praised her for mending his favorite tunic, the quiet conversations about the latest court gossip, the worried look he gave her when she had once stumbled with a heavy silver tray. Surely these moments meant something. Surely he would remember. A different kind of sound began to permeate the dungeon's thick walls, not the rustle of robes or the clatter of plates, but human sounds, muffled sobs, desperate pleas, the dragging of feet, followed by the clinking of chains. Alara pressed her ear to the cold stone, her breath catching in her throat. A woman's wail, sharp and piercing, tore through the quiet. I am innocent. By the mother, I swear it. Her voice was raw with terror. Then a man's deeper, choked cry, ending abruptly, as if silenced by force. Alara imagined heavy boots, rough hands, the cold, unyielding path toward some nameless doom. Her blood ran cold. These were other servants, accused just as she was, perhaps for even lesser transgressions. Their cries were fading, growing distant, swallowed by the winding passages of the dungeon, until only a chilling echo remained. She pulled away from the wall, her body trembling uncontrollably. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the images her mind conjured, the horrific fates implied by those fading screams. Was this what awaited her? To be dragged away, unheard, unseen, another nameless victim in the palace's dark machinations? A wave of pure, unadulterated fear washed over her, making her teeth chatter. The guard returned at intervals, bringing a meager bowl of watery broth and a crust of stale bread. Each time Alara would ask, her voice thinner and more strained, "Did you speak with the prince? Did he send word?" Each time the guard's face was grim. "No word, girl. He is busy with affairs of state." The excuses grew more flimsy, the dismissal more brusque. Alara felt her fragile hope fraying, then snapping entirely. Kalen had not replied. He had not sent a single message. The silence was not just neglect. It felt like a deliberate turning away, a cold, calculated absence. Her mind struggled to reconcile the kind, thoughtful prince she knew with this sudden, stark indifference. Another visit from Serafina. This time her eyes held a glint of barely suppressed triumph. The air in the cell felt even colder, heavier. "Still clinging to your innocence, Alara?" Serafina purred, her voice a silken thread of malice. Such stubbornness. It is often the downfall of those who believe they are owed more than their station. Alara looked up, her blue eyes dull with exhaustion and despair. "What more do you want from me?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "I have nothing to confess because I have done nothing wrong." Serafina clicked her tongue, a sound of feigned disappointment. "Such a pity. The prince, you see, is a busy man. The kingdom's health depends on his focus. These distractions, They are costly. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He would be most displeased if a long, drawn-out affair were to further dampen the spirits of the court. He desires a swift resolution. Alara felt a fresh stab of pain, sharper than any hunger pang. A swift resolution. That could only mean one thing. Resolution to what? She whispered, though she already knew the answer. To your unfortunate situation, of course, Serafina replied, her smile widening just a fraction. The people need reassurance. They need to know that those who would harm Eldoria's precious dragons are dealt with swiftly and justly. And the prince, dear Alara, must be seen to be unwavering in his commitment to the dragons, even when it involves difficult choices. She spoke of Kalen as if he were a puppet, his actions dictated by the needs of the court, the whispers of the high priestess. Alara's heart ached with a terrible understanding. Was Kalen truly so weak, so easily swayed by ambition and fear? Was their shared history, their quiet moments, so meaningless to him? He would not condemn me, Alara murmured. More to herself than to Serafina, her voice laced with a desperate, fading belief. Serafina merely chuckled, a dry, rustling sound like dead leaves. Oh, Ilara, he is a prince of Eldoria. His duty is to the kingdom, not to a maid, however loyal she once seemed. She watched Alara's face, savoring the slow erosion of hope. But do not worry. Your fate will not be a quiet, ignoble one. No, it will be quite the spectacle. A public trial, a chance for all of Eldoria to witness the prince's unwavering dedication. The words struck Alara like a physical blow. A public trial, with Kalen presiding. The image of his handsome face, now hardened by purpose, flashed before her eyes. He would sit on the high dais, his gray eyes looking down on her, the accused. The betrayal that had been a dull ache now sharpened into a searing agony. A few days later, a sudden commotion echoed through the dungeon. The clanking of armor, the urgent tread of many feet. The heavy door to Alara's cell burst open, revealing two hulking guards. Their faces were impassive, their grips firm, as they pulled her roughly to her feet. "What is happening?" Alara demanded, her voice trembling. One of the guards, a man with a scarred cheek, merely grunted. "A royal decree has been announced. The grand courtroom awaits." He looked at her with a flicker of something resembling pity before his eyes hardened again. "For you, Maid." As they dragged her through the winding passages, up stone stairs that seemed endless, Ilara's mind reeled. A public trial. She was to be paraded before the entire court, before the very people she had served so humbly. And Kalen, her prince, the one man she had trusted above all others, would sit in judgment. The thought was unbearable, a fresh wound tearing through her already fractured spirit. Each step felt like walking towards her own execution. She heard the distant, muffled sounds of the palace above, faint laughter, the murmur of voices, the clink of silverware. Sounds that once represented her world, her duties, her life. Now they felt like a mocking echo of a past that was slipping further and further away. A profound sense of abandonment settled over her, cold and absolute, like the dungeon stones. She stared at the rough, damp wall of the corridor, the flickering torchlight making grotesque shadows dance. The sounds of the palace, so close yet so impossibly far, became a cruel, distant memory of her lost life. Heavy wooden doors of the grand courtroom groaned open, their sound echoing through the vast chamber. Alara felt cold iron bite her wrists and ankles as guards pushed her forward. Her eyes, adjusting to the sudden light, swept across a sea of faces, searching. Each step on the polished stone floor sent a shiver of fear up her spine, a chilling reminder of her position. She smelled faint tapestries and the sharp metallic tang of fear. Her gaze found the raised dais, fixed on Prince Kalen Thorn, her Kalen, on the ornate throne. His face was a mask of cold resolve. His gray eyes, usually warm, now seemed distant and impenetrable. The sight stole her breath. This was not the Kalen who joked in palace kitchens or trusted her with his secrets. This man wore robes of authority, a stranger devoid of warmth. The immense chamber's vaulted ceiling, adorned with faded dragon frescoes, soared above. Sunlight through stained glass windows cast fragmented colors across the silent crowd. Alara felt 100 eyes, their collective judgment a heavy weight. She heard a nervous cough, rustling silks, and the frantic pounding of her own heart. The shackles clinked with each hesitant movement, a harsh sound in the hushed air. Alara stood fragile before the dais, dizziness washing over her. She gripped the cold iron shackles, anchoring herself to the terrifying reality. High Priestess Seraphina then emerged from shadows near the throne, gliding forward with unsettling grace. Her silver hair was pulled back, her sharp green eyes fixed on Alara. Her voice, usually a silken murmur, now resonated with unsettling authority that filled the room. "People of Eldoria," Seraphina began, her words measured, "we stand at a precipice. The sacred bond with our dragons falters, weakened by unseen hands." Her gaze flicked to Alara, cold and accusing. This woman, Alara Vance, a maid, stands accused of gravest treason, poisoning the dragon bonds, an act of sorcery threatening our existence. Alara's stomach tightened. It was a lie, a careful fabrication. Seraphina wove a tapestry of deceit. She spoke of dark rituals, whispered incantations, and a thirst for forbidden power. She painted Alara as a malevolent witch, driven by envy, using her royal proximity for wicked schemes. This calculating villain was utterly unrecognizable to Alara. A low murmur rippled through the courtroom, a collective gasp of horror. Alara tried to protest, but her throat was dry, no sound emerging. The crowd's faces blurred into a condemning mass. She felt their hatred, a chilling draft. Seraphina's voice intensified, her accusations bolder. "She sought to sever our connection to the creatures that protect us, whose strength is ours." The air grew heavy, suffocating. Alara tasted bitter fear, her breath catching. Alara's eyes desperately sought Kalen's, a silent plea for him to intervene, to speak the truth. But he remained unmoving, a statue of cold indifference on his seat. Her being screamed for him to look, to remember their years of loyalty, shared laughter, quiet talks. He knew her. How could he allow these falsehoods? His silence cut deeper than Seraphina's words. Seraphina then turned to Kalen, her voice softening with triumph. "Your Highness, Prince Kalen, you witnessed this maid's palace presence, her movements. You know her character best." A terrible anticipation coiled in Alara's gut. This was her chance. Kalen would speak for her, dispel the lies. He would remember their years, the trust she placed in him. Kalen shifted on the throne, an imperceptible movement, sending a tremor of dread through Alara. His gray eyes remained shadowed, revealing nothing. He cleared his throat, the sound reverberating through the hushed chamber. The crowd leaned forward, their breath held. Alara's heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs. She clenched her hands, shackles digging into her skin, a physical anxiety. "I have known Alara Vance for many years," Kalen began, his voice steady, devoid of warmth. Each precise word devastated Alara, a chill seeping into her bones. She served faithfully, or so it seemed. The court held its breath. Alara's breath hitched, a tremor running through her. She clung to fading hope, a desperate prayer he was playing a part, that he would save her. "But truth," Kalen continued, his voice chilling, "is often hidden beneath deception." He looked directly at Alara, his gaze passing through her as if she were a ghost. It ripped through her last hope. "I observed strange behaviors, unusual absences. I dismissed them as a maid's eccentricities, or perhaps her secret affairs." A gasp rippled through the courtroom, louder, tinged with scandal. A hot flush crept up Alara's neck. Secret affairs? He was inventing, twisting their history into something ugly. Her mind raced for an explanation, any reason for this betrayal. Had Seraphina threatened him? Was he under dark influence? Her eyes pleaded, searching for the Kalen she knew. But only this cold stranger remained. The scent of fear filled her nostrils, suffocating. "My own dragons," Kalen continued, his voice laced with feigned sorrow, "have shown signs of malaise. Their breath weakened, their scales dulled. These symptoms began around the time Alara Vance was granted more palace freedom, access to forbidden areas." He paused, allowing the insidious implication to settle. His words were a dagger, twisting in an already gaping wound. He painted her with treachery, claiming her quiet nature was deceit, her loyalty a mask for nefarious intent. He systematically dismantled every memory, every shared moment, reshaping them into proof of her guilt. Each sentence was a hammer blow, shattering her reality. Alara's vision blurred not from tears, but from the overwhelming unreality. This was a nightmare. I regret to say, Kalen stated, his voice tinged with crafted sorrow, that Ilara Vance, whom I once considered loyal, has betrayed my trust in the essence of Eldoria. Her treachery jeopardizes our sacred bond with the dragons. He lowered his gaze, affecting profound disappointment. The crowd murmured, faces a mixture of shock and indignation. The courtroom air felt thick with the weight of Kalen's words. Laura's mind reeled. She remembered countless nights Kalen shared his dragon worries, trusting her with his fears. She offered comfort, brewed teas for his anxieties, listened without judgment. Now those moments twisted into evidence against her. Her loyalty, once her greatest strength, became her damning weakness. A profound sense of loss, a void, threatened to swallow everything inside her. Therefore, Kalen announced, his voice ringing with false authority that made Alara's stomach churn, after considering evidence from High Priestess Seraphina and my own testimony, I find Alara Vance guilty of high treason. The words hung cold, definitive, shattering Alara's last hope. A collective gasp, loud and visceral, swept through the courtroom. It was a sound of shock and of judgment past. Her Kalen, the boy she watched grow into a prince, the man she served, had just condemned her. His betrayal was not a whispered rumor, but a declaration before the entire court. The silence after his verdict was absolute, broken only by distant cooing doves outside, an innocent sound out of place in this hall of despair. Light through the stained glass dimmed, casting mournful shadows. The sentence, Kalen continued, his voice unwavering, is to undergo the judgment of the chains of verdict. He spoke of the ancient, dreaded chains as a mere formality. The mention sent a fresh wave of terror through Alara. She knew their reputation, searing pain for the guilty, gentle warmth for the innocent. But in Kalen's eyes, no doubt of her guilt remained. He had already condemned her. Guards tightened their grip, fingers digging into her flesh. She barely noticed the pain, her entire being focused on Kalen, on his unfeeling mask. He had not just judged her, he had erased their past, dismissed their bond, and destroyed all her trust. Her heart, which clung to him even in the dungeon, now felt utterly broken. The weight of his words was heavier than any physical chains. A profound, soul-deep despair settled upon her, thick and suffocating. Her legs, having carried her through years of service, now refused to hold her. The world tilted, the grand courtroom spinning. She fell, not from the guard's push, but because the foundation of her existence crumbled. She landed on her knees on the cold stone floor, the impact a dull throb against the sharp agony of her shattered heart. Every breath was a struggle, each heartbeat a painful reminder of what she had lost. The rough hands of the guards dug into Alara's arms, pulling her mercilessly across the cold stone floor of the grand courtroom. Each scraped knee sent a jolt of pain through her, yet it was a dull, distant ache compared to the agonizing emptiness within her chest. Tears blurred her vision, turning the hundreds of faces in the crowd into a swirling, hateful canvas of judgment and sneering curiosity. She could hear their murmurs, a low, venomous hum that vibrated through the very air, each sound a tiny shard of glass lodging deeper into her already fractured spirit. Her throat felt raw and constricted, making it impossible to even sob. She swallowed hard, trying to force moisture back into her parched mouth, but only found a desert. Every step was an ordeal, her body heavy with despair, her legs threatening to give out under the immense weight of the betrayal. She remembered the warmth of Kalen's smile, a memory that now felt like a cruel trick of her mind, a phantom limb that still throbbed with a pain that was not truly there. He had once looked at her with such genuine affection, his eyes crinkling at the corners when she told him a funny anecdote from the kitchens. One afternoon, many years ago, when Kalen was just a young prince, a clumsy stable boy had accidentally spilt a bucket of slop all over Alara's newly laundered apron. She had stood there, mortified, her cheeks burning, tears welling up in her eyes as the other servants snickered. Kalen, barely a teenager himself, had emerged from the stable doors and seen her distress. He had walked over, a frown etching his brow, and without a word, he had taken off his own finely embroidered tunic, using it to gently wipe the streaks of mud from her apron. His touch had been surprisingly tender, his gray eyes, then full of youthful kindness, meeting hers with a silent reassurance that she was not alone. "Do not let their thoughtlessness dim your spirit, Alara," he had whispered, his voice a soft murmur meant only for her. "Your heart is far cleaner than any fabric." She had cherished those words, holding them close through countless lonely nights. That single act of unexpected kindness had solidified her loyalty, deepening her devotion to him far beyond the duties of a mere maid. She had seen him as a true prince, a future king who possessed not just power, but also profound compassion. He had been her champion, her quiet confidant in a bustling palace where she often felt invisible. Now, as the guards pulled her toward the center of the courtroom, each memory returned as a fresh wound, twisting the knife that already plunged deep into her heart. She could recall the countless evenings she had spent in his study, just the two of them, while he studied ancient texts. She would bring him warm spiced milk, and he would often share insights about the history of Eldoria, his voice passionate, his gestures animated as he spoke of his dreams for a just and prosperous kingdom. She had listened intently, feeling a quiet pride swell within her, believing in his vision with every fiber of her being. He had spoken of unity, of strength derived from fairness, of protecting the innocent and upholding truth. How hollow those words sounded now, echoing in the cavernous space where he had just condemned her. She remembered his intense focus when discussing the dragon bonds, the way his brow would furrow with concern over even the slightest tremor in their shared connection. He had confided in her, admitting his fears and his hopes, trusting her with his vulnerabilities in a way he had never trusted anyone else. She had thought their bond was special, a silent understanding built on years of shared moments and unwavering trust. Then there was the winter festival, a particularly harsh year when the palace staff were overworked and morale was low. Alara had caught a terrible fever lying shivering in her small, cold cot in the servants' quarters. Kalen, despite his royal duties, had somehow found out. He had appeared at her bedside, cloaked and hooded to avoid notice, carrying a small, steaming bowl of broth and a warm woolen blanket. He had sat beside her for what felt like hours, murmuring comforting words, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead until her fever broke. "You worked tirelessly for this palace, Alara," he had said, his voice husky with concern. "You deserve care just like anyone else." He had made her feel seen, valued, truly a part of something, not just a tool. That memory, above all others, tore at her soul. The prince who had once nursed her back to health now stood on a dais, condemning her to a cruel fate, his eyes devoid of any recognition. The betrayal was not merely an act of cruelty, it was the shattering of a fundamental belief in the goodness of another human being. He had not just broken her heart, he had broken her very understanding of trust. A bitter, dry laugh escaped her lips, quickly stifled by a guard's harsh jerk on her arm. The sound was ragged and unfamiliar, like something torn from a beast. Her own naivete felt like a heavy shroud, suffocating her with its foolish warmth. She had truly believed in his sincerity, in his honor, in the sanctity of their shared history. Now she understood that all those tender moments, those whispered confidences, had meant absolutely nothing to him. They were but fleeting shadows, easily dismissed for the cold light of ambition and fear. She stumbled forward, her gaze momentarily catching Kalen's distant figure on the raised dais. He was still there, a regal statue, his face utterly unreadable. No flicker of remorse, no trace of the boy who once wiped mud from her apron, no hint of the man who had shared his dreams. Her heart, already in pieces, fractured further. It was not anger that consumed her, but an overwhelming, profound sense of loss. The Kalen she had known, the Kalen she had loved and served with every ounce of her being, was gone. He had vanished, replaced by this cold, distant figure who watched her degradation without a shred of compassion. The guards finally halted, pushing her roughly onto a designated spot in the very center of the courtroom. The air here felt colder, heavier, charged with the palpable expectation of what was to come. She felt naked, exposed under the scrutinizing gaze of the entire court, her tattered clothes and disheveled hair doing little to cover her shame. The whispers grew louder, each word a venomous dart aimed directly at her. She could not make out the specific words, but the malice in their tone was unmistakable. Then, a hush fell over the crowd, a sudden, chilling silence that announced the arrival of the ultimate instruments of judgment. Her eyes, still swimming with tears, lifted to see two royal guards approaching the dais, moving with slow, deliberate steps. Between them, carried on a large crimson velvet cushion, were the chains of verdict. They gleamed with a cold, unnatural silver, each link thick and heavy, intricately inscribed with ancient runes that seemed to pulse with a faint internal light. The metal itself seemed to drink the light from the stained glass windows, reflecting it back as an icy, dead glimmer. A chilling aura emanated from them, a palpable coldness that seeped into Alara's bones, causing an involuntary shiver to run down her spine. These were not mere chains, they were a living, breathing testament to Eldoria's unforgiving justice, said to discern truth through pain. Alara had heard the legends of the chains of verdict, tales whispered among the servants, stories of how they would either embrace the innocent with gentle warmth or brand the guilty with searing agony. Her stomach churned with a mixture of terror and a desperate, fragile hope. She was innocent. Surely they would recognize that. Surely the chains would acknowledge the truth that Kaelin had so cruelly denied. A small, desperate part of her still clung to the magical justice of the kingdom, believing it would expose the lies of Seraphina and the prince. High Priestess Seraphina descended from the dais, her severe silver hair pulled back in its usual intricate coiffure. Her dark robes flowed around her, giving her a serpentine grace as she moved. Her sharp green eyes fixed on Alara, holding a triumph that chilled Alara to the very marrow of her bones. A cruel, thin smile played on Seraphina's lips, a silent promise of the suffering that awaited. It was not just satisfaction Alara saw in those eyes, but a deep, malevolent pleasure, as if Seraphina relished every moment of Alara's humiliation. "Let the truth be revealed," Seraphina's voice cut through the silence, calm and measured, yet edged with an unmistakable steel. Her words echoed in the vast chamber, sealing Alara's fate. She extended a hand, her long, manicured finger pointing directly at Alara. "Bind her. Let the chains of verdict pass judgment upon her wickedness." The two guards carrying the velvet cushion approached Alara. The heavy chains clinked softly as they moved, a sound that reverberated through the sudden, acute silence of the courtroom. Alara's breath hitched in her throat, her chest tightening with an unbearable pressure. She could smell the faint scent of old iron and something else, something metallic and cold, radiating from the chains themselves. It was the smell of judgment, of finality, of an ending she could not escape. Her eyes flickered one last time to Kaelin, seeking any sign, any flicker of hesitation, any regret. But he remained impassive, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond her, his face a perfect mask of cold resolve. The Kaelin she had known truly was gone, vanished beneath layers of fear and ambition. There was nothing left but a stranger, a judge, a betrayer. The last ember of hope within her died, extinguished by the impenetrable wall of his indifference. The first guard reached for her outstretched left wrist, his fingers cold and impersonal. She flinched, not from his touch, but from the terrible anticipation. The metallic scent of the chains grew stronger, permeating the air around her, filling her lungs with a suffocating dread. She heard the faint click as the guard prepared to secure the first link. Her muscles tensed, bracing for the inevitable. Every nerve ending in her body screamed in protest, but she remained silent, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a whimper. The cold, hard metal touched her skin. As the first cold link of the chains of verdict touched her wrist, a jolt of searing pain shot through Alara, forcing a gasp from her lips. The cold, heavy metal of the chains of verdict bit into Alara's flesh. It was an immediate, brutal embrace, the iron links sharp and unyielding. The edges dug deep into the delicate skin of her wrists, then her ankles, a chill seeping bone deep before the pain. A searing agony, swift and unforgiving, spread like a venomous current from those points, radiating through her limbs. She could feel the intricate runes etched deep along the chain's surfaces, pressing into her skin, their cold forms suddenly warming. They began to glow with an eerie, sickly green light, a luminescence that seemed to feed on her pain. The light pulsed with a slow, malevolent rhythm, each beat a sinister heartthrob, a deliberate mockery of life. Every throb of that unsettling light sent a fresh wave of burning torment through her veins, a liquid fire that felt less like heat and more like corrosive acid. It coursed beneath her skin, threatening to consume her from the inside out, burning away her very substance. Her breath hitched in her throat, a choked, ragged gasp escaping her lips, thin and raw against the sudden, profound silence of the courtroom. The pressure around her limbs intensified, growing tighter, more suffocating with each passing second. The air in the grand courtroom itself seemed to grow heavy, thick with the metallic scent of fear and the damp, earthy smell of old stone. It pressed down on her, a physical weight on her shoulders, on her lungs, making each attempt to draw breath a struggle. The very atmosphere felt conspiratorial, closing in. Her vision blurred not just from the hot, salty tears that streamed relentlessly down her face, but from the overwhelming sensation of being torn apart. It felt as though her very essence was being stretched, pulled in opposing directions, her body a mere vessel for this unspeakable torment. She clenched her jaw until her teeth ached, grinding them together, biting back a scream that clawed at the back of her throat. A metallic tang, the taste of her own fear and desperation, filled her mouth, sharp and bitter. Her body trembled uncontrollably, a violent, involuntary shiver running through her limbs, her knees threatening to buckle under the strain. Every nerve ending in her body screamed in protest, demanding release from the unrelenting grip of the chains, demanding surrender to the agony. She knew this pain was no accident, no mere punishment. It was designed to break her, to force a confession from her lips, to crush her spirit into dust. Yet something deep within her, a stubborn, wounded part of her soul, refused to yield. A small, defiant spark flickered. She would not give them the satisfaction of hearing her cry out in defeat, of seeing her break. Her gaze, though unfocused and swimming with pain, struggled to search the vast hall, searching for a face, any face that held a flicker of compassion. Her eyes finally landed on Kalen, still on the dais, his figure rigid and unmoving, a statue of indifference. His face remained a mask of stone, devoid of any discernible emotion, a chilling emptiness that pierced her more deeply than the chains. His silence, his absolute indifference to her suffering, fueled a new kind of fire within her. It was a cold, hard, righteous anger that warred fiercely with her despair, giving her something to hold on to besides pain. The sickly green light intensified, throbbing brighter and faster, casting longer, distorted shadows across the high, arched walls of the courtroom. The dancing shadows seemed to twist and writhe like mocking figures, closing in around her, whispering accusations with their silent movements. Alara felt the immense weight of every accusing stare from the hundreds of silent, watchful faces in the crowd. Each whisper, a soft, venomous hiss from the onlookers, felt like a judgment, a sharp, cold stone thrown at her already shattered self. These whispers were daggers, not physical, but cutting into her soul, twisting deep in the raw, open wounds Kalen had inflicted upon her with his betrayal. She was nothing to them, a simple maid, a mere servant, now accused of an unimaginable crime that she could not even comprehend. She stood there, bound and broken, utterly alone, betrayed by the one person she had trusted above all others, the one she had served with unwavering devotion for years. Her loyalty, once her greatest strength, the very foundation of her simple, honest life, now felt like a crushing burden, a naive folly that had led her directly to this agonizing moment. The bitter irony of it all, that her faithfulness was her undoing, that her trust had been her gravest mistake, was a cruel taste in her mouth, mingling with the metallic tang of her own fear and the rising nausea. She almost choked on it, as the searing pain threatened to drag her into a blessed unconsciousness. Just as the edges of her vision began to darken and blur into a swirling void, something deep inside her shifted. It was subtle at first, a faint flicker in the vast darkness of her agony, almost imperceptible. Then a desperate, defiant spark ignited deep within her core, like a tiny ember catching flame in a cold, forgotten hearth. She found herself remembering her quiet life, the simple, honest days spent sweeping floors, mending clothes, caring for others. She recalled the small kindnesses she had offered without thought of reward, the genuine smiles she had received in return, the unwavering dedication she had given to her duties. A profound, unshakable certainty bloomed in her mind, clear and sharp through the fog of pain. She had done nothing wrong. She was innocent. This thought, simple and pure, became a lifeline, a solid, immutable anchor in the storm of agony that raged around her. She would not, could not let them erase her truth, her very being, her identity. Her heart, though shattered by betrayal and physical pain, began to pulse with a renewed, fierce rhythm. It was a primal rhythm of survival, a heartbeat that echoed the ancient pulse of something far older than these cold, brutal chains, far older than this judging court, older even than the very stone beneath her feet that vibrated with the silent accusations. Then, through the agonizing haze that threatened to consume her, something new began to stir, something entirely unexpected. Flashes, sharp and intensely vivid, began to appear behind her eyes. They were not memories, not echoes of her past, but fleeting, vibrant images that surged forth without warning, unbidden. They came and went in an instant, quick and disorienting, like glimpses caught through a thin, shimmering veil that separated worlds. She saw a vast, endless sky, a deep, impossible blue that stretched into eternity, filled with a sense of boundless freedom. Then, scales of polished obsidian, gleaming like countless facets of dark jewels, cool and smooth to the touch of her mind's eye, reflecting the light in myriad ways. Next, eyes burning with an intense molten gold, ancient and all-knowing, staring directly into her, piercing her very soul. An immense sweep of powerful wings, so vast they could eclipse the sun, filled her internal vision, moving with a grace that defied their size. Dragons, they were dragons, not the weakened, fading creatures of the palace lore, whispered in hushed tones as if they were fragile myths confined to dusty scrolls. These were beings of raw, untamed power, majestic and awe-inspiring, their presence filling her with a strange, undeniable reverence, a sense of belonging she had never known. The images were gone as quickly as they came, leaving behind a faint, shimmering afterimage that lingered, teasing at the edges of her awareness, a whisper of impossible grandeur and a question of what she had just witnessed. Then, a surge of unknown energy, wild and untamed, erupted from deep within her core. It pulsed through her veins, a living current, warring fiercely with the searing pain of the chains, pushing back against the torment. The sensation was profoundly strange, both terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, a dangerous dance between fear and awakening. It began as a deep thrumming in her bones, a low vibration that resonated through her very marrow, then spread outward, a vibrant, humming warmth that pushed against the cold iron. Her muscles tensed, not in agony or fear, but with a nascent power she had never known, a fundamental strength that felt entirely new to her body. This was not the familiar ache of hard work, the honest fatigue of her daily duties, nor the stinging, biting pain of the chains that sought to bind her. This was something primal, elemental, flowing through her like a river of molten gold, warm and heavy and brilliant, illuminating her from within. It felt both alien and profoundly familiar, a paradox that whispered of destiny, as if it had always been there, merely dormant, waiting for this very moment of despair to awaken and claim her. The coldness of the chains, the relentless burning of the runes, suddenly felt distant, secondary to this burgeoning, incredible force within her. Her focus shifted entirely from the agony to the magnificent, terrifying power now coursing through her, changing her from the inside out. The sickly green glow of the chains of verdict, which had been so malevolent in overpowering moments before, now flickered erratically. It pulsed unevenly, struggling, actively fighting against an unseen, powerful force emanating from Alara. The pulsing light became unstable, wavering dramatically, its intensity fading and then surging with a final violent burst that made the air crackle with static electricity. A collective gasp, sharp and sudden, ripped through the stunned, silent crowd, their eyes widened in disbelief fixed on the spectacle before them. The oppressive green light began to fade, shrinking back, dissolving into nothingness. It was replaced by a blinding, incandescent white, so pure it almost hurt to look at. This new, brilliant light emanated not from the chains themselves, but from deep within Alara. It radiated outward from her very being, a pure, fierce energy, pushing back against the oppressive magic of the bindings with an unstoppable force. Her simple maid's dress, woven from coarse, undyed fabric, seemed to shimmer and glow, caught in the otherworldly luminescence, transforming her humble appearance. Small hairline cracks, barely visible at first glance, began to spiderweb across the surface of the chains. They started precisely where the blinding white light was strongest, directly around her wrists and ankles, growing rapidly. These were tiny fissures in the gleaming silver, a stark, undeniable betrayal of the immense strain the powerful magical bindings were now under, threatening to give way. A deep, resonant hum, low and guttural, began to fill the cavernous courtroom. It seemed to rise not just from the air, but from the very stone beneath their feet, from the ancient foundations of the hall, vibrating upwards. The sound pulsed, a living tremor, through the air, through Alara's bones, and through the very bodies of the onlookers, making their teeth ache. The hum grew steadily in intensity, a booming, growing sound that was both profoundly unsettling and strangely compelling, drawing every eye, every breath into its thrumming rhythm. It was a sound that spoke of immense ancient power, stirring from a long-forgotten slumber, a warning and a promise. The hairline cracks in the chains of verdict, now brilliant under the intense white light, spread rapidly, visibly lengthening and deepening. They branched out like miniature lightning bolts, searing white against the silver surface, extending their reach across the metal in intricate, destructive patterns. The chains groaned, a low, metallic shriek audible to everyone present, a sound of protest and imminent failure, threatening to burst apart at any second, unable to contain the force any longer. The resonant hum intensified, vibrating not just through the heavy silver chains, but deep within Alara's bones, a pulse that resonated with an ancient memory. Her vision, blurred moments before by pain and tears, sharpened to an impossible clarity. She saw the intricate runes on the chains, each glowing with a furious, sickly green, now overlaid with a new, incandescent white. The air around her crackled with an unseen energy, charged and volatile, making the small hairs on her arms stand on end. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a drumbeat of fear and something else, something wild and untamed beginning to stir. The cracks in the thick silver links spread like spiderwebs across ice, groaning under an immense, invisible pressure. A high-pitched whine joined the deep hum, growing louder, more piercing, until it threatened to split the eardrums of everyone in the grand courtroom. Ilara felt a peculiar combination of agony and exhilarating release. The chains were tearing themselves apart, and with each rending sound, a piece of the suffocating weight that had pressed upon her soul seemed to lift. She gasped, not from pain this time, but from the sheer, overwhelming sensation of burgeoning power. It felt like 1,000 years of slumber suddenly awakening within her, roaring to life. Then, with a deafening crack that ripped through the very foundations of the palace, the chains of verdict exploded. Fragments of gleaming silver shrapnel, imbued with a strange, cold light, flew outward in every direction. They whizzed past the faces of horrified spectators, embedding themselves in the heavy oak benches and the stone pillars with sharp metallic thuds. A collective shriek of terror erupted from the crowd, a wave of pure panic washing over the courtroom as people ducked and screamed, scrambling away from the epicenter of the blast. Dust and pulverized stone erupted into the air, momentarily obscuring everything. Through the swirling chaos, a blinding golden light burst forth from Alara. It wasn't just bright, it was an incandescent wave of pure force, pushing outwards with an undeniable raw power. The nearest guards, who had stood frozen in shock a moment before, were suddenly thrown backward as if struck by an invisible hammer. Their heavy armor clattered against the stone floor, their bodies skidding across the polished surface. One guard hit a pillar with a sickening crunch, then lay motionless. The entire courtroom trembled, a deep, guttural shudder passing through the ancient stone walls and high vaulted ceiling. Tapestries lining the walls whipped and tore as if caught in a sudden hurricane, and the ornate chandeliers above swayed violently, threatening to crash down. Ilara stood in the center of it all, bathed in the radiant golden aura, completely unbound. Her simple, dirt-stained servant's dress, the same one she had worn day after day, now fluttered around her as if caught in an unseen gentle breeze, despite the violent tremors shaking the room. Her chestnut hair, usually neatly braided, had partly come loose, strands illuminated by the inner light that now streamed from her. Her earnest blue eyes, once often downcast and filled with quiet sorrow, now glowed with an ethereal molten gold. It was a fierce, ancient light, one that seemed to look not at the present, but through eons of time. She felt utterly different, yet profoundly herself, as if she had finally stepped into the skin she was always meant to wear. A profound silence fell, broken only by the whimpers and gasps of the remaining terrified onlookers. High Priestess Seraphina, her face a mask of disbelief and horror, stumbled backward, her sharp green eyes wide with a fear Ilara had never seen in her before. Prince Kalen, perched on the high dais, had risen to his feet, his handsome features pale and utterly drained of color. His piercing gray eyes were fixed on Ilara, a mixture of terror and a dawning, terrible understanding reflected in their depths. The man who had condemned her, who had betrayed her with such cold resolve, now looked as if he had seen a ghost, or perhaps a living nightmare. Ilara felt the light pulsing within her, warm and powerful, yet strangely familiar. It felt like a song she had forgotten, now echoing through every fiber of her being. Her heart still beat fast, but it was a rhythm of strength, not fear. The world seemed to expand around her, colors sharper, sounds clearer, a keen awareness of every detail in the room. She could feel the fear radiating from the crowd, a cold, clammy sensation, but it no longer touched her. Her gaze swept across the faces, briefly lingering on Kalen's, then Seraphina's. There was no anger, no sorrow, only a vast, empty space where those emotions once lived, now filled with this raw, surging power. Then a deep, resonant rumble began, not from within the courtroom, but from somewhere far off, deep within the mountains that cradled the palace. It was a low, primeval sound, a vibration that started beneath the stone floor and rose slowly through the very air. It felt like the earth itself was stirring from a long sleep, exhaling a breath that shook the world. Dust sifted down from the high ceiling, tiny motes dancing in the golden light radiating from Ilara. The rumble grew, a sound that bypassed the ears and went straight to the chest, vibrating against the ribs, making breath catch in the throat. A collective murmur of fear swept through the crowd, quickly escalating into panicked shouts. People pointed towards the massive arched windows high above, where the distant peaks of the Eldoria Mountains were visible. The rumbling was no longer just a sound, it was a physical force, growing in intensity, growing closer with terrifying speed. It was an ancient, earth-shaking roar, rising from the very heart of the world. It echoed through the palace, reverberating through every corridor, every chamber, every stone. The massive building groaned under the strain, its grandeur suddenly seeming fragile and insignificant against such an immense force. Ilara felt the roar not just as a sound, but as a response. It was a call, and something deep within her recognized it, yearned for it. A strange primal instinct stirred, a feeling of coming home to a power she had never known she possessed. The golden light around her flared brighter, mirroring the intensity of the approaching roar. Her own skin felt hot, alive, tingling with anticipation. She watched the panic unfold around her with a detached clarity, as if observing a play in which she was both the central figure and a distant, all-knowing spectator. Seraphina let out a choked cry, her composure finally shattering. She began to chant something under her breath, a desperate string of ancient words, her hands trembling as she fumbled for something at her waist. but her voice was swallowed by the escalating roar, which now filled the entire courtroom, a deafening wave of raw, untamed power. The grand tapestries on the walls, depicting proud dragon riders and their majestic mounts, began to sway wildly, as if the very images within them were coming to life. Kalen stood frozen, his eyes still locked on Alara, but his gaze now flickered nervously towards the windows. He saw the shift in her, the incandescent power that had replaced the timid maid, and the knowledge of his betrayal weighed heavily upon him. He had dismissed her, condemned her, and now she stood, a blazing beacon of something utterly beyond his comprehension, linked to an ancient force that threatened to tear his world apart. His carefully constructed life, his ambition, his reign, all suddenly seemed to be dissolving into dust. A cold dread seeped into his bones, a premonition of irreversible change. The roar reached a crescendo, a thunderous, all-encompassing sound that drowned out all other noise. It was the sound of a mountain moving, of a storm breaking, of an ancient heart beating with unimaginable power. The very air grew heavy, thick with energy, making it difficult to breathe. The ornate carvings on the walls seemed to vibrate with the force, dust streaming from every crevice. The massive oak doors at the courtroom entrance, usually guarded by stern soldiers, shuddered violently, then burst inwards, ripped from their hinges by an unseen force, sending splinters flying. Through the gaping doorway, a gust of wind, powerful and smelling of ancient stone and crisp mountain air, swept into the chamber, extinguishing many of the flickering torches. The already terrified crowd screamed anew, a frantic, desperate sound. Guards who had been thrown to the ground struggled to stand, their faces pale with terror, their weapons forgotten. They looked not at Alara, but at the source of the overwhelming sound, their eyes wide with incomprehension and pure, visceral fear. This was not a human enemy. This was something primal, something from the forgotten depths of their world. Alara felt the call intensify, a powerful magnetic pull drawing her towards the source of the roar. It was a longing, an instinct she could not deny, a recognition of a deep, forgotten kinship. The golden light around her pulsed in response, a silent communication between her newly awakened essence and the ancient force hurtling towards them. She lifted her chin, her glowing eyes scanning the high vaulted ceiling, feeling the structure groan and tremble beneath the sheer pressure. The great stained glass ceiling, a masterpiece depicting the glorious bygone era of dragon riders, began to shimmer. The intricate leading, which had held the colorful panes together for centuries, started to buckle and bend under the immense, unseen force from above. Small cracks, like thin veins, appeared on the vibrant glass, spreading rapidly. The depictions of noble knights and majestic dragons, once inspiring, now seemed to mock the fragile reality of the present moment. A low, mournful creak echoed through the chamber, the sound of ancient timber straining to its breaking point. Then, with a deafening crash that obliterated all other sound, the grand courtroom's massive stained glass ceiling shattered inward. A cascade of glittering razor-sharp glass rained down into the chamber, sparkling like a million deadly jewels in the fading light. The air was filled with a terrifying symphony of splintering wood, grinding stone, and tinkling glass. As the last fragments fell, a sudden immense shadow descended over the terrified crowd, plunging the courtroom into an ominous twilight. The immense shadow that fell over the terrified crowd was not from the shattered ceiling, but from something far older, far more powerful. Dust and fragments of stained glass rained down, catching the light from outside the gaping hole above, swirling like disturbed snow. A blast of cold, ancient air rushed into the courtroom, carrying the scent of pine forests and deep earth, instantly silencing the screams. Then a sound emerged that was not of this world, a deep, guttural growl that vibrated through the very stone of the palace. It was a sound that awakened primal fear, a sound that spoke of forgotten ages and untamed might. Through the swirling dust, a colossal form began to descend, blocking out the sky itself. Its scales shimmered like polished obsidian, each one the size of a shield, reflecting the scattered light with an unnerving, dark brilliance. Two eyes, vast and burning with molten gold, pierced the gloom, fixing on Alara. Alara felt the ground tremble beneath her feet, a tremor that echoed deep within her bones. But she did not fall. Her own heart pounded like a war drum, a frantic rhythm that somehow resonated with the approaching behemoth. Fear was a cold hand gripping her throat, yet beneath it, a strange, undeniable warmth spread through her chest. It was a feeling of recognition, of something long lost finally found. She watched in horrified awe as the creature descended, its massive wings beating slowly, deliberately, displacing the air with incredible force. The dragon, Ignis, landed with a thunderous impact that shook the entire courtroom to its foundations. A violent shockwave ripped through the air, sending guards and courtiers sprawling, their shouts of terror swallowed by the sheer force of its arrival. The very ground cracked beneath its immense weight, fissures radiating outwards like lightning bolts from the point of impact. Ignis's massive claws, sharp as mountain peaks, dug into the cold stone, creating deep gouges. A cloud of acrid smoke billowed from its nostrils, thick with the smell of sulfur and burnt rock. The air around its snout shimmered with residual heat, and where its breath had touched the floor, the ancient stones smoked and blackened, scorching into permanent scars. The crowd, those who were not cowering, scattered in utter disarray, a chaotic wave of panicked faces and flailing limbs. They scrambled over benches, pushing and shoving, desperate to escape the terrifying presence of the beast. Alara, however, remained rooted to the spot, a strange calm settling over her. The golden light that still emanated from her body seemed to intensify, a silent defiance against the chaos. She could feel the dragon's immense power, a raw, untamed force that dwarfed everything else in the room. Yet she felt no threat from it, only a profound, ancient connection. It was as if her very soul was a magnet, drawing the colossal creature to her. Ignis shifted its weight, a movement that sounded like boulders grinding together, and slowly, deliberately, it turned its massive head towards Alara. The molten gold in its eyes softened, losing their initial intensity, becoming curious, almost reverent. A low rumble emanated from its chest, a sound that should have been terrifying, but to Alara it felt like a deep purr in acknowledgement. The air shimmered around her, no longer with the raw heat of the dragon's breath, but with an almost palpable energy. Then, to the utter astonishment of every single living soul in the grand courtroom, Ignis performed an act that defied all understanding. The colossal dragon, a creature of legend, slowly lowered its immense head. Its long, serpentine neck bent, bringing its massive snout down to rest gently on the scorched stone floor, directly before Alara. It was a profound, unmistakable bow, an act of deference that spoke louder than any words. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the ragged breathing of the terrified few who still dared to look. A collective gasp, thin and trembling, rippled through the frozen court. The high priestess Seraphina's carefully composed face contorted into a mask of pure disbelief, her sharp green eyes wide with a terror she could not hide. Her lips moved, forming no sound, as if her mind struggled to comprehend what her eyes were seeing. Guards who had been trained since childhood to face any threat stood paralyzed, their weapons forgotten, their faces ashen. Alara felt a jolt go through her, her breath hitched in her throat, a choked sob escaping her lips. This was not just a beast. This was a being of immense wisdom, a creature that had chosen her. The connection she felt solidified, a warm, pulsing current that flowed from the dragon, through the air, and into her very being. It was as if a missing piece of her own soul had finally returned. A lifetime of doubt, of feeling small and insignificant, dissolved in that moment, replaced by an undeniable, resolute strength. Her fingers, still trembling slightly, reached out instinctively, drawn by an invisible force. She touched the smooth, warm obsidian scale of Ignis's snout. The contact was like an electric current, igniting something deep within her. Visions flashed through her mind. Ancient forests, towering peaks, the rush of wind under mighty wings, the deep, resonating song of dragons. She saw, she understood, and in that understanding, her purpose became clear. Tears, hot and cleansing, streamed down Alara's face, but these were not tears of sorrow or fear. They were tears of profound revelation, of a destiny unveiled. Her chest swelled with a power that felt both ancient and brand new, a force that had lain dormant within her, waiting for this very moment. Her eyes, still glowing with that ethereal golden light, now held a fierce, unwavering resolve. The subservient maid, the falsely accused sorceress, was gone. In her place stood something new, something powerful. The dragon let out another low rumble, a soft vibration that echoed through Alara's fingertips. It was a communication, a silent telepathic message that filled her mind with an ancient language, yet one she understood perfectly. It spoke of loyalty, of a bond forged in ages past, now reawakened. It spoke of a heritage, a bloodline that flowed through her veins, connecting her directly to the very essence of dragonkind. Alara straightened, her small frame now imbued with an unyielding power that made her seem taller, more imposing. The golden light around her pulsed, illuminating the terrified faces of the court, casting them in stark relief against the gloom. She looked at the wreckage around her, the broken chains, the shattered ceiling, the frightened people, and saw not chaos, but a new beginning. Her voice, when it came, was soft, but it carried an undeniable resonance that cut through the silence. "You have been misled," Ilara's voice echoed, not with anger, but with a quiet, devastating authority. Every word resonated, each syllable vibrating with the power that now surged within her. The Dragon Prince's betrayal, the High Priestess's cruel manipulation, all of it seemed utterly trivial in the face of this immense, ancient truth. The world had shifted on its axis, and she was at its very center. Serafina recoiled, her silver hair askew, her face now a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. Her hands, which usually held such power, now trembled uncontrollably at her sides. All her intricate plans, her years of careful manipulation, had crumbled in an instant. This was not simply a maid, not merely a woman with dormant magic. This was something entirely beyond her comprehension, something she had foolishly sought to destroy. Prince Kalen, who had watched the entire horrifying spectacle from the high dais, felt a cold sweat prickle his skin. His face, usually so regal and composed, was now ashen, devoid of all color. He had seen the chains shatter, witnessed the golden light, felt the ground shake. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the sight of the ancient dragon, Ignis, bowing before Alara. The very air around him seemed to thicken, making it difficult to breathe. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. The image of Alara, the simple maid he had condemned, now standing bathed in golden light, with an ancient dragon at her feet, burned itself into his mind. Her eyes, those earnest blue eyes he had once looked into, now glowed with an otherworldly gold, holding a power he had never imagined. He remembered her unwavering loyalty, her quiet devotion, her gentle kindness. He remembered the faint, almost imperceptible warmth of her hand in his as a child. Now all of that was overshadowed by the terrifying, undeniable reality before him. He had betrayed her. He had sentenced her to death, pushed her to this very brink. And in doing so, he had unleashed something profound, something that would irrevocably alter the course of his kingdom. The horror of his actions, the full weight of his colossal mistake, crashed down upon him. He had sought to destroy a supposed threat, only to awaken a dormant legend. Kalen's legs felt like lead, heavy and unresponsive, yet he stumbled back from the dais. His hands scrabbled blindly for purchase on the back of his throne, his fingers white-knuckled. He needed to get away, to escape the impossible reality unfolding before him. His eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and astonishment, remained locked on Alara and the bowing dragon, a dawning horror creeping across his pale, haunted face. A chill not born of the shattered ceiling now gripped Prince Kalen, making his teeth ache. The taste in his mouth turned to ash, a bitter powder clinging to his tongue. He watched Alara, the maid he had condemned, standing before the colossal dragon, Ignis, its obsidian head bowed in reverence. The world had tilted on its axis, and Kalen felt himself slipping, gravity losing its hold. The air thrummed with a raw, ancient energy, thick with the scent of ozone and something akin to burnt metal. He wanted to speak, to call her name, but the words caught in his throat, choked by a fear he had never known. Every fiber of his being screamed that he had made a terrible, irreversible mistake. His palms were slick with a cold sweat, his vision blurring around the edges, focusing only on her. Alara felt the power surge through her, a river of molten gold flowing where fear once resided. Her voice, when it came, was not her own, yet it was undeniably hers. It was deeper, resonant, carrying the weight of ages, cutting through the stunned silence of the courtroom like a sharpened blade. Each word was a strike, a deliberate blow aimed at the heart of the treachery that had nearly consumed her. She looked first at Seraphina, the high priestess, whose elaborate coiffure seemed to wilt under the sudden intense gaze. "You, high priestess," Alara's voice boomed, amplified by the very stone around them, "spun a web of lies, poisoning the very foundation of this kingdom." The air around Seraphina seemed to thicken, pressing in on her, making her robes rustle with an invisible force. Alara's eyes, no longer downcast but burning with a golden light, held Seraphina captive. "You sought power through deception, twisting ancient truths to serve your own hollow ambition." A shudder ran through the high priestess, her usually composed face now etched with a desperate, frantic fear. The illusion of control she had so meticulously crafted shattered around her, exposing the raw, ugly truth of her machinations. Then, Ilara's gaze shifted, slowly, deliberately, towards Prince Kalen. The golden light in her eyes seemed to intensify, burning through the layers of his princely facade, revealing the frightened, weak man beneath. A wave of profound sorrow washed over Alara, but it was quickly subsumed by a steely resolve. The boy she had served, the man she had loved in secret, was gone, replaced by this stranger who had condemned her without a second thought. The image of his cold, impassive face as he pronounced her guilty flashed through her mind, a wound that would never fully heal. "And you, Prince Kalen," her voice softened slightly, yet lost none of its terrible authority. "You betrayed not just me, but the very essence of trust." The words hung heavy in the air, a physical weight pressing down on Kalen. He felt the accusation like a branding iron, searing his conscience. A dull ache began in his chest, spreading through his limbs, a cold, hollow sensation. He tried to meet her gaze, to find a flicker of the old Alara, the gentle maid who would bring him tea in the mornings. But there was only this powerful, awe-inspiring stranger. Alara continued, her voice rising once more, the sorrow hardening into a righteous fury. "You allowed fear and ambition to guide your hand, casting aside loyalty for the illusion of power." Her words were not merely sounds, but vibrations that resonated deep within Kalen, rattling his bones, shaking the very core of his being. He could taste the bitterness of his own actions now, a foul tang on his tongue that made him want to retch. The dawning horror on his face deepened, twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated regret. He saw not only Alara's power, but the chasm he had opened between them, one that could never be bridged. Seraphina, her face contorted with a mixture of rage and terror, could not endure the raw power of Alara's condemnation. Her perfect silver coiffure seemed to unravel, strands of hair escaping, framing her now gaunt features. Her sharp green eyes darted around, seeking an escape, a weapon, anything. She reached into the folds of her rich, dark robes, her fingers fumbling for a hidden pouch. A desperate, chilling incantation began to spill from her lips, a guttural sound that seemed to pull at the very fabric of the air. It was a forbidden spell, one whispered only in the darkest corners of forgotten libraries, designed to shackle or destroy that which defied the will of the caster. A surge of dark, swirling energy erupted from Seraphina's outstretched hand, coalescing into a sickly green bolt that shot towards Alara. The air crackled, smelling of sulfur and something ancient, corrupt. Alara watched it approach, a strange calm settling over her. She did not flinch, did not move. It was as if time itself slowed around her. The awakening power within her rose to meet the challenge, an instinctive, effortless response. With a mere thought, a ripple of golden light flared around her, a protective shield of pure energy. The dark bolt struck this shimmering barrier with a sickening hiss. It dissipated instantly, broken into harmless motes of black dust that dissolved into nothingness. Yet, the deflected energy, redirected by Alara's nascent will, did not vanish. It arced sideways with a blinding flash, striking a massive, intricately carved pillar that supported the vaulted ceiling of the courtroom. The stone groaned under the sudden impact, a deep, mournful sound. A spiderweb of cracks instantly spread across its surface, then widened, deepening with alarming speed. Dust rained down from above, thick and choking, adding to the chaos. The once majestic pillar groaned again, then crumbled inward with a sound like thunder, sending chunks of masonry crashing to the floor. The sound of the collapsing pillar was deafening, echoing through the already damaged courtroom. It sent the remaining guards, who had been frozen in a tableau of terror, into a full-blown panic. Their polished armor clattered as they scrambled, pushing and shoving each other, their faces pale beneath their helmets. They had witnessed Alara, a mere maid, effortlessly negate a high priestess's forbidden spell and shatter a stone column with a mere deflection. This was not magic they understood. This was something primal, something terrifying. They were soldiers, trained for battle, but not against such an overwhelming, incomprehensible force. Ignis, who had been patiently observing the unfolding drama, let out a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the floorboards and up into the very bones of the fleeing guards. It was not a roar of aggression, but a deep, resonant warning, a sound of ancient impatience. The sound alone was enough to send a fresh wave of terror through the panicked men. They dropped their weapons, swords, and spears clattering onto the stone, and scattered like startled mice, disappearing through the shattered archways and broken doors, their frantic shouts fading into the distant echoes of the palace. The courtroom, once bustling with courtiers and guards, was now eerily quiet, save for the settling dust and the distant cries of the fleeing few. Only Alara, Ignis, Seraphina, and Prince Kalen remained. Seraphina stood frozen, her face a mask of utter despair and defeat, the last vestiges of her power stripped away. Her eyes, once sharp and commanding, were now wide and vacant, staring at the ruined pillar, at the evidence of Alara's unimaginable strength. She was utterly exposed, a venomous snake with its fangs removed. Prince Kalen remained on the dais, stumbling back further, his hand reaching out blindly for something to steady himself. His chest heaved, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The scent of fear was strong around him, mixing with the dust and ozone. His eyes, wide with a profound, aching sorrow, never left Alara. He saw her not as the maid he had known, but as a queen, a goddess, standing before her ancient protector. He understood now, with a clarity that felt like a physical blow, the depth of his folly. He had sacrificed loyalty for an illusion, kindness for a hollow crown. The crown felt heavy on his head, a burden of guilt and regret. Ilara turned fully to Ignis, a gentle hand reaching out to touch one of its massive obsidian scales. The surface was warm, surprisingly smooth, humming with a deep, powerful energy that resonated with her own. She felt a profound connection, a sense of belonging that surpassed anything she had ever known. The dragon lowered its head further, its molten gold eyes meeting hers, a silent understanding passing between them. There was no fear in Alara, only a quiet certainty, a burgeoning strength. With a fluid motion that belied her small frame, Ilara placed her foot on Ignis's outstretched foreleg, then gracefully swung herself onto the dragon's immense back. The scales were like stepping stones, firm and unyielding. The dragon's presence was overwhelming, yet Alara felt no unease, only a surge of exhilarating power. The air shifted around her as she settled into the hollow between Ignis's shoulder blades, the immense warmth of the creature radiating through her. She was not riding a beast, she was merging with a force of nature. From her new vantage point, high above the dais, Ilara cast one final, piercing look at Kalen. His face was a canvas of conflicting emotions: shock, fear, despair, and a profound, agonizing regret. She saw the tears welling in his eyes, tracking paths through the dust on his cheeks. A part of her, a deep, old part that still remembered the boy who had once shared his secrets with her, ached. She remembered his kindness, the way he would sneak her sweets from the royal kitchens, the soft comfort of his hand when she stumbled. But that boy was lost, corrupted by the thirst for power and the poisoned words of Seraphina. Her expression remained unreadable, a cold, hard mask. There was no forgiveness, no pity, only a stark realization of what had been lost forever. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words, with shattered dreams and broken trust. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a final farewell to a past that had been irrevocably destroyed. She would not allow herself to feel the old pangs of affection. He had made his choice. She had made hers. Ignis, sensing her resolve, shifted its immense weight. A low rumble vibrated through its chest, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the palace. Then, with a mighty beat of its colossal wings, the dragon launched itself upwards. The air screamed as it tore through the gaping hole in the courtroom ceiling, pieces of glass and stone still raining down. The sheer force of the takeoff sent a violent gust of wind through the chamber, making banners snap and sending loose debris swirling like a miniature storm. They burst into the open sky, the cold night air a stark contrast to the stifling heat of the courtroom. The stars above Eldoria, once distant and unreachable, now seemed to twinkle just beyond their wingtips. Below them, the royal palace was a sprawling testament to the kingdom's grandeur, now marred by a rapidly spreading destruction. The immense speed of Ignis carried them away with breathtaking force, the ground rushing away below them. Alara looked down, her heart pounding with a mixture of awe and sorrow. The palace, once her home, her prison, her place of betrayal, was succumbing to the chaos they had unleashed. Tongues of fire licked greedily at the white stone walls in several places, sending plumes of smoke curling into the night sky. The cries of alarm from below, once muffled, now rose to them, faint but distinct, carried on the wind. The destruction was not something she had willed, but an inevitable consequence of the raw power that had been awakened within her, a power that could no longer be contained. The flames danced, casting an eerie orange glow over the city, reflecting in the glossy obsidian scales of Ignis. This was not an act of revenge, but a declaration, a shattering of the old world. As Alara and Ignis soared into the sky, the palace below burned in several places, a stark testament to the Maid's sudden and terrifying power. The wind tore past Alara's face, a cold, liberating caress as Ignis soared higher, leaving the burning palace of Eldoria far below. The air thinned, sharp and clean, washing away the stench of smoke and betrayal that clung to her memory. She gripped a scale on Ignis's neck, the ancient dragon's immense power a living current beneath her fingers, a stark contrast to the fragile human world she had just left. Ignis flew with a purpose, a destination known only to its ancient mind, carrying Alara toward a new, terrifying yet exhilarating fate. The journey was long, punctuated by the rhythmic beat of colossal wings in the vast silence of the night sky. Alara found a strange peace there, suspended between earth and stars, the weight of her old life lifting with every gust of wind. Her mind replayed Kaelin's face, etched with fear and astonishment, in a flicker of something she could not name. The image brought a fresh wave of sorrow, but it was quickly overshadowed by the raw, untamed power now thrumming within her own veins. She felt it pulsing, a slow, steady heartbeat, echoing Ignis's own. They descended at last, hours later, into a secluded valley shrouded in mist, nestled deep within jagged peaks. The air here was heavy with the scent of damp earth and ancient moss, a silence so profound it seemed to absorb all sound. Before them stood the ruins of what must have been a magnificent structure, now overgrown with clinging vines and shadowed by towering, silent stones. This was the Whispering Crags Sanctuary, a place out of legend, where time seemed to fold back on itself. Ignis landed with a soft, precise motion, its vast form fitting perfectly among the colossal rock formations. Alara slid from Ignis's back, her legs shaky, still adjusting to the solid ground beneath her. The ground felt alive, vibrating with a subtle energy that resonated deep within her bones. She walked among the crumbled walls, her hand tracing the smooth, cold stone, feeling an echo of lives long past. These stones had seen centuries, perhaps millennia, of sun and storm, sheltering secrets now stirring awake. The wind whispered through unseen crevices, carrying faint melodic sighs that sounded like forgotten songs. She could hear it now, not just with her ears, but with something deeper, a part of her soul that had just been awakened. Ignis lowered its massive head, its molten gold eyes fixed on Alara. A warmth spread through her mind, not a voice she heard, but a cascade of images and feelings, a direct transfer of knowing. This place remembers you, Alara. The sensation resonated, a deep rumble within her very being. It remembers your blood, your line. The first riders sought sanctuary here, building temples to the bond, to the ancient pact. The raw power of Ignis's communication was overwhelming, yet strangely comforting, like returning to a forgotten home. Alara felt tears sting her eyes, not from sorrow, but from a profound sense of recognition. Ignis continued, the telepathic stream painting vivid pictures in her mind. She saw a woman with hair like spun moonlight, astride a dragon of pure silver, soaring above these very crags. The woman's face was strong, her eyes filled with a fierce determination that mirrored a burgeoning resolve within Alara herself. Your ancestor, Lyra of the Silver Wings, Ignis conveyed, the name a gentle whisper in her consciousness. She forged the first true bond, not of conquest, but of partnership. Her spirit, her power, flows through you. The revelation was staggering. Ilara, the simple maid, was a descendant of legendary dragon riders. The visions intensified, not just as static images, but as living memories projected directly into her awareness. She felt the wind in Lyra's hair, the heat of the dragon's scales beneath her, the exhilaration of flight. She saw other riders, men and women, their faces etched with awe, sorrow, and unwavering courage. They lived in harmony with their dragons, their lives intertwined, their destinies one. The dragons were not mere beasts of burden or war. They were partners, confidants, extensions of their riders' very souls. This was the true legacy of Eldoria, a heritage deliberately obscured. Alara saw battles not fought with swords alone, but with the combined might of human will and draconic fire. She witnessed moments of deep despair, when the bond faltered, when fear and greed began to poison the hearts of men. She watched as the powerful connection between humans and dragons slowly eroded, twisted by those who sought to control rather than coexist. High Priestess Seraphina's predecessors, driven by fear of unrestrained power, had gradually demonized the riders, slowly erasing their history, replacing it with tales of monstrous dragons and humble human princes. The telepathic explanation continued, weaving through generations, showing the gradual decline of the dragon riders, their numbers dwindling, their power fading into myth. Your line, the Vance line, was among the last true blood, Ignis communicated, a note of sorrow woven into the ancient connection. They scattered, hid their power, their children forgetting their heritage, until only whispers remained. Until you. Alara understood then. Her quiet life, her unassuming nature, had been a shield, unknowingly protecting the last spark of a mighty lineage. Her heart ached for the lost history, for the centuries of forgotten truth. She reached for the sunstone brooch at her throat, her fingers tracing its familiar warm surface. It had always been there, a small comfort, a quiet presence. Now, Ignis's shared knowledge illuminated its true purpose. The brooch is a fragment of the first egg, crafted by Lyra herself, Ignis revealed, the image of a glowing, multifaceted crystal appearing in Alara's mind. It holds the essence of the primal bond, a key to unlock the deeper currents within your blood. Alara looked at the brooch with new eyes, seeing not just a simple trinket, but a living connection to her ancestors, a tangible piece of her incredible destiny. She found herself gravitating towards a pool of still, clear water within the ruins, its surface reflecting the faint starlight filtering through the crags. Ignis settled near her, its massive head resting on the moss-covered stone, its golden eyes watching her with patient wisdom. Alara felt a subtle pull from the brooch, a warmth that spread from her chest throughout her body. She closed her eyes, focusing on that sensation, trying to understand this dormant power now stirring within her. She remembered the surge of golden energy in the courtroom, the feeling of something ancient and vast waking up. She focused on that memory, trying to replicate the sensation, to summon it at will. A small tremor ran through her hands. Nothing. She tried again, picturing the light, the heat, the feeling of power, unadulterated power. Frustration began to bubble, but Ignis's calm presence, a steady warmth in her mind, quelled it. "It is not forced, Alara," Ignis conveyed. "It is felt. It is allowed." Alara took a deep breath, letting go of the need to make something happen. She instead focused on being the power, on feeling the echoes of Lyra and the other riders. She felt the ancient energy of the sanctuary, the hum beneath the earth, the whispering winds. She opened herself to it, to Ignis, to the memories of her ancestors. The sunstone brooch pulsed once, twice, a gentle beat against her skin. Then a faint golden light shimmered around her fingertips, dancing like tiny fireflies. It was barely visible, a fleeting spark, but it was hers. A thrill ran through her, a wild, exhilarating joy she had never known. She tried to hold it, to sustain it, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. A small gasp escaped her lips, a mixture of awe and disappointment. Ignis sent a wave of encouragement. A beginning, a true spark from the ancient fire. Alara smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached her eyes. This was not a power to wield for destruction, but to nurture, to understand. Over the next few days, the Whispering Crag Sanctuary became her classroom. Ignis, her patient, silent mentor. Alara spent hours by the still pool, or tracing the ancient runes carved into the crumbling walls. She learned to listen to Ignis, not just through telepathy, but through subtle shifts in its posture, the nuanced warmth of its presence, the faint stirring of the air around its immense form. She began to anticipate its intentions, to understand its unspoken desires, creating a seamless, wordless dialogue between them. Her practice with the draconic energy continued, moving from fleeting sparks to more sustained bursts of golden light. She discovered that the power was tied to her emotions, to her focus, to her very breath. When her mind wandered, the light flickered. When doubt crept in, it vanished. But when she centered herself, focusing on the deep ancestral connection she now felt, the energy flowed, steady and strong. It felt like an extension of herself, a part of her that had always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the jagged peaks, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet, Ilara sat cross-legged by the pool, the sunstone brooch warming against her skin. She had been attempting to manifest a small orb of draconic energy, something more substantial than mere sparks. She closed her eyes, picturing the golden light, feeling its heat, its potential. She remembered Lyra, soaring free, her spirit intertwined with her dragon. Ilara imagined that same boundless freedom, that unwavering bond. A strong, steady warmth pulsed from the brooch. She felt the energy coalesce between her outstretched palms, a soft golden sphere, hovering delicately in the air. It hummed with a gentle power, radiating warmth, casting a soft glow on her face. Her breath hitched, her heart thumping with astonished triumph. This was real, this was hers. She looked at Ignis, its golden eyes gleaming with approval. The ancient dragon sent a wave of pride and affirmation through their bond, a silent roar of victory. As Alara held the orb, marveling at its steady glow, the sunstone brooch on her chest flared with an intense, blinding light. The light enveloped her hand, the one holding the orb, and then settled, focusing on her palm. There, etched into her skin, visible only for a moment before fading into a subtle mark, was an intricate, swirling sigil. It looked like a stylized dragon, its wings unfurled, its head crowned with ancient symbols. The mark pulsed faintly, like a second heartbeat, a permanent tattoo of her awakening. Wind whipped Alara's hair as Ignis soared over jagged peaks, a colossal shadow against the vast sky. Below, the world stretched out, far different from the palace. Each beat of Ignis's wings carried her from the grandeur of Eldoria towards a truth she had never known. She clung to Ignis's neck, feeling the warmth of his obsidian scales, a contrast to the cold betrayal in her heart. Ignis's thoughts, a deep rumbling in her mind, guided her through mountain passes and shadowed valleys. He spoke of scattered communities, those who remembered the old ways. These were people wronged or driven from their homes by Seraphina's tightening grip and Kalen's fear. Alara realized Ignis led her to the kingdom's forgotten heart, where dissent simmered. The air grew thin, smelling of pine and damp rock. Their first stop was a cluster of dwellings in a canyon hidden by a rock overhang. The air smelled of damp earth and wood smoke. Ilar saw faces etched with hardship, but also with resilience. Children, wide-eyed, watched Ignis's descent, clutching their parents' rough garments. These were the people, the kingdom's true foundation. Ignis landed gently, his massive form filling the canyon, yet graceful. His golden eyes scanned the faces, conveying a silent message of peace. Alara dismounted, her boots sinking into mossy ground. A tremor of uncertainty passed through her, a maid before strangers, but Ignis's strength and her purpose pushed it away. "We have come for justice," Alara's voice, soft but resolute, carried across the gathering. Her simple words held truth. She spoke of her journey, of Kalen's betrayal, and the power she had found. She described the courtroom terror, the shattering glass, and Ignis's arrival. A wizened old woman, her face a map of wrinkles, stepped forward. Her gaze pierced Alara. "We heard whispers," the woman rasped. "Whispers of a maid, a dragon, and the palace burning." Her eyes flickered toward Ignis, then back to Alara, a spark of hope replacing weariness. Alara's story began to take root in the community. Alara felt their scrutiny, their desperate need for belief. Words alone would not be enough. She extended her hand, and a golden light blossomed from her palm, briefly illuminating the canyon. Ignis rumbled low, a sound of ancient affirmation. The people gasped in awe. "She is of the ancient blood," Ignis's telepathic voice boomed in their minds. "The true heir, destined to mend what has been broken." His words cemented Alara's authority as a link to a forgotten past. The villagers, their faces now alight, offered her dried berries and fresh water. Days became weeks as Alara and Ignis traveled between hidden outposts. Ignis knew secret paths and isolated villages where faith in dragons still flickered. Alara met farmers whose lands Seraphina's agents seized. She met artisans whose crafts were banned, and healers whose remedies were outlawed. Each story fueled her resolve against the high priestess. A farmer described losing his harvest, his family left to starve. A young mother whispered of her child lost to illness after healers were suppressed. These stories pressed upon Alara a heavy cloak of despair. But beneath it, a new fire burned. She saw the people's calloused hands, their tired eyes, and knew she could not fail them. Alara learned to speak as a leader, not a maid. She spoke of balance, of the natural order disrupted by greed and fear, and of dragons suffering alongside people. Her words resonated, touching shared grievances. Hope flickered in weary eyes, determination hardening soft expressions. The sunstone brooch at her collar pulsed with warmth, reflecting her growing conviction. It was a tangible connection to her power. Sometimes she focused, drawing on energies that flowed through her, causing the air to shimmer with a golden hue. Ignis watched, his molten eyes tracking her every gesture. Her demonstrations of power were subtle, meant only to convince. A wilting plant would bloom at her touch. A small flame danced in her palm without fuel. The stones beneath her feet hummed. These small miracles, coupled with Ignis's presence and pronouncements, turned skepticism into belief. The journey brought hardships. Nights were spent under open skies, the chill seeping into her bones despite Ignis's warmth. Days brought little food, but Alara found strength in the people's resilience, their quiet hospitality, and their shared longing. She saw her past self in their faces and knew she could not fail. Ignis's ancient wisdom guided her. He spoke of dragon lineages, prophecies, and the kingdom's fate tied to its dragon riders. He reminded her that her power was for creation, for healing. "Your heart," his voice echoed, "is the truest compass, Alara. Follow its path towards balance." Word of Alara and Ignis spread. Soon individuals sought them at the Whispering Crags, drawn by change, by the legend of the Dragon Maid. Among them were seasoned warriors, former soldiers who deserted Seraphina's cruel regime. Their worn armor bore battle marks, but their eyes held a spark of hope. One evening, by a campfire, a small group of fighters approached Alara. Their leader, Thomas, broad-shouldered and battle-hardened, knelt. "My lady," he said, his voice rough but sincere. "We were guards, sworn to the prince." But his judgment faltered. His eyes were clouded by fear, his ears deafened by the high priestess's lies. Elara listened, her heart aching at Kaelin's name. Thomas spoke of unease in the palace, whispers of dissent, and Kaelin's condemnation of Elara. Many questioned the prince's actions, unable to reconcile the loyal maid with Seraphina's sorceress. When the chains of verdict shattered, Thomas continued, and the dragon descended, we knew the truth had spoken. The memory still held terror for him. He explained that he and others slipped away in the chaos, unwilling to serve a regime that condemned innocence. They waited for a sign, a leader. We watched the palace burn, Thomas said, his voice grim. We knew a new age had begun. We seek to serve the true heir, to restore honor to Eldoria. Elara felt gratitude and responsibility. These were trained fighters, men who knew the palace's workings. Their allegiance was invaluable. I seek not revenge, Elara told him, her voice clear. I seek justice. I seek to restore balance, to free Eldoria from this shadow. Ignis, resting nearby, lifted his massive head, his golden eyes glowing. A low rumble emanated from his chest, shaking the trees. It was a powerful endorsement. One by one, the former guards knelt, placing hands over their hearts, pledging loyalty to the Dragon Maid. Their eyes shone with renewed purpose. Their numbers grew. Messengers brought disillusioned souls to Elara's banner. Blacksmiths, farmers, even minor nobles flocked to the Whispering Crag sanctuary. The ancient ruins hummed with purpose and determination, echoing with training and planning. Elara watched them, a profound shift within her. The quiet maid was gone, replaced by a leader. Her heart still ached for the Kaelin she once knew, but that pain now fueled her. She moved with new grace, her steps surer, her gaze direct. Discussions around the planning table were intense. Flickering oil lamps cast shadows across the cavernous space. Elara sat on a stone bench, Ignis's head resting nearby. Thomas and his lieutenants spread maps of Eldoria, tracing routes and strategic points. They discussed guard rotations, secret tunnels, and Seraphina's loyalists. The main gate will be heavily fortified, Thomas explained, pointing at the parchment. Seraphina will expect an assault there. She is cunning. He detailed palace defenses. The former guards knew the palace better than anyone. Elara listened intently, visualizing every corner. Her purpose was clear, not to raise Eldoria, but to liberate it. Her escape's destruction had been a raw cry of anguish. This time her actions would be precise. We must minimize bloodshed, Elara stated, her voice firm. Our goal is to remove Seraphina and expose Kaelin's complicity, not to destroy the kingdom. She felt her own resolve. Ignis's telepathic voice added strategy. The skies are your domain, Elara. They will not anticipate an assault from above, not from a force they believe extinct. This highlighted their unique advantage. They devised a multi-pronged approach. Ignis would be the vanguard, creating a powerful diversion from the sky. While guards were distracted, Thomas and his men would infiltrate through a service entrance, securing the courtyard. Elara, with a small elite group, would target Seraphina directly, aiming to expose her crimes before the court. The thought of facing Kaelin again sent a shiver through Elara, a cold grip on her heart. She pictured his cold, betraying face during the trial. Yet she knew she had to confront him, to make him see the truth for the kingdom he allowed to crumble. Her heart yearned for the Kaelin she once served, but that Kaelin seemed long dead. She had to believe a spark of the old Kaelin remained. We must move swiftly, Elara concluded, her golden eyes sweeping over the determined faces. Seraphina's power grows daily. The people suffer. Her resolve was absolute, tempered by empathy for the suffering she had witnessed. She fought for Eldoria's future, for the dragons, for balance. The Whispering Crags hummed with preparation. Weapons were sharpened. Strategies were rehearsed. A unified spirit solidified among Elara's forces. She saw a collective united by shared grievance and hope. They were Eldoria's forgotten heart, beating with fierce rhythm, ready to reclaim their future. Elara felt her destiny settle upon her shoulders, no longer a burden, but a purpose. The sunstone brooch warmed her chest, a reminder of the ancient power within her. She walked among her allies, head held high, steps confident. The maid was gone. The leader had emerged, poised for confrontation. The morning air crackled. She stood at her army's head, their faces grim but resolute. Ignis, a mountain of black scales, let out a majestic roar that shook the ground. Ilara's golden eyes, blazing with determination, fixed on Eldoria's distant spires. She pointed towards them. Eldoria's spires pierced the dawn sky, a stark challenge now, not a distant memory. Ilara, astride Ignis, felt the dragon's immense power thrumming beneath her, a living current of fire and earth. The crisp, cold air tasted of anticipation and faint wood smoke from the city below. Her loyalists, former guards, disillusioned citizens, and young rebels followed like a tide, grim but resolute. She remembered the palace halls, once echoing her footsteps as a maid for a betraying prince. Now she returned not as a servant, but as a force. Ignis let out a low growl, vibrating through Alara's bones, rippling across the mountain air. The dragon veered, catching an updraft, bypassing fortified gates with ease. Below, a lone guard on the ramparts squinted, then shouted in terror as Ignis descended. Alarms blared, their frantic clangor cutting the morning silence, warning the palace grounds. Alara felt grim satisfaction. This was a declaration, not stealth. Her heart pounded, a drumbeat of purpose against the wind. The ground shuddered as Ignis landed in the courtyard, scattering guards and courtiers. Ozone and dragonfire filled the air, sharp and acrid. Behind them, Alara's forces poured in, steel and shouts, meeting palace guards. Swords clashed immediately, a brutal symphony of metal, cries of defiance and pain. Ilara scanned the chaos, her mind clear. She saw the glint of armor, the determined jaws of her loyalists. This was the kingdom purging a poison. She dismounted Ignis, her feet on the cold stone where she had once scrubbed floors. Ignis, a living fortress, roared again, sending primal fear through Seraphina's guards. Their formations broke. Many fled rather than face the beast. Ilara felt her power surge, a golden warmth radiating from her chest, making her sunstone brooch pulse. She focused, a shimmering shield of energy forming around pinned rebels, deflecting arrows. This power was for them, for truth. Suddenly, a cold, precise voice cut through the din. The little maid has found her wings, but they are tainted with rebellion. High Priestess Seraphina stood on a balcony, her silver hair severe, her green eyes burning. Fanatical acolytes flanked her, their dark robes contrasting with the dawn. Dark energy crackled around Seraphina, a sickly sweet odor of incantations wafted down. Ilara met her gaze, weariness mixing with resolve. The priestess's voice carried a subtle chill, like a dagger in a silken sleeve. "You have twisted this kingdom, Seraphina." Ilara's voice boomed, amplified by draconic essence, carrying over the battlefield. "You corrupted its heart, betrayed its people. Your reign of fear ends today." Seraphina let out a high, brittle laugh. "Foolish girl, you wield a beast's power, but lack a ruler's mind. This kingdom belongs to the divine. I am its earthly vessel." She raised her hands, silver rings flashing, dark magic snaking from her fingertips, coalescing into a swirling shadow vortex. The stones beneath Ilara's feet hummed with malevolent intent. Sulfur grew stronger. This was no parlor trick. It was a desperate, powerful assault. Ilara felt Ignis stir, a low rumble of warning from his chest. She raised her hands, golden energy swirling, mirroring the dragon's sigil on her palm. "You mistake devotion for divinity, Seraphina," Ilara countered, her voice resonating with power. "You have no right to this kingdom, nor its dragons." The golden energy pulsed, a brilliant sphere of light pushing back the shadows. Her raw power, untamed, differed from Seraphina's calculated sorcery, yet was no less potent. The magical duel began. Seraphina unleashed dark bolts, each streaking with a chilling hiss, aiming for Ilara's heart. Ilara met them with golden energy, deflecting them, causing explosions of light and shadow that tore at the stones. The ground vibrated with their clash. The battle between guards and loyalists faltered, both sides transfixed. Ilara felt the strain, the willpower required to hold back Seraphina's magic. Yet Ignis's power flowed within her, a bottomless wellspring, a primal connection to energy. Seraphina shrieked, her face contorting with rage as her attacks failed Alara's defenses. "You are nothing but a common maid, a creature of dirt," she spat, venom lacing her words. "How dare you defame me? She gathered strength, body trembling, and manifested a colossal shadowy dragon of pure darknesses that lunged towards Alara. The air grew cold, heavy with dread. The stench of decay filled Alara's nostrils. Ignis roared, challenging the false dragon. Before Alara could command, he sprang forward, meeting the beast with molten gold fire. Light and dark collided in a devastating explosion that rocked the palace. Dust and debris rained down, obscuring the fight. Ilara used the distraction, channeling her power, focusing her intent. She felt the ancient lineage within her surge, a connection to every dragon over Eldoria. She pushed out a blinding wave of draconic energy aimed directly at Seraphina. The golden power struck Seraphina's balcony with shattering force. The dark construct dissolved. The high priestess, caught off guard, was thrown backward, crashing against the wall. Her acolytes, pale with terror, scattered. The dark magic around her dissipated, replaced by a smell of burnt sugar and desperation. Seraphina struggled to rise, her robes torn, hair disheveled, revealing the fragile woman beneath the formidable facade. Her power was broken. Prince Kalen Thorn watched the devastation from a hidden vantage point, his face etched with fear, awe, and dawning horror. The battle sounds were deafening, his guards' cries mingling with loyalist shouts. He saw the shimmering golden energy from Alara, a sheer, undeniable power from a meek servant. He saw Ignis, the ancient dragon, proudly by her side, a creature of legend brought to life. Smoke and spilled blood filled his nostrils, a bitter, metallic taste coating his tongue. He had believed Seraphina, or wanted to. Her whispered lies and promises of a stable kingdom were easier to accept than confronting his weakness and fear. He remembered Alara's loyal eyes, her unwavering kindness. Those memories, buried beneath ambition, surfaced with vengeance, tearing at his composure. He saw his ancestral palace crumbling around him, not by invaders, but by the justice he denied. Kalen's hands trembled, clammy with sweat. He had made a terrible choice. Consequences now engulfed his world. He still heard Seraphina's desperate incantations, fading, overwhelmed by Alara's radiant power. He chose ambition over truth, power over loyalty, leading to this ruin. The realization hit him like a physical blow, leaving him breathless. He felt profound, aching regret, a gaping void where pride had once been. Ozone from Alara's magic, now cleansing the air, seemed to mock his foul decisions. Alara advanced towards Seraphina, her steps measured, golden eyes fixed on the fallen priestess. She felt no triumph, only cold, hard resolve. Ignis followed, his shadow falling over Seraphina, sprawled and defeated. The high priestess, eyes wild with terror, looked up at the dragon, then at Alara, a desperate shriek tearing from her throat. Ignis, molten gold eyes burning, opened his maw. A torrent of brilliant cleansing fire erupted. Seraphina, defeated, shrieked as Ignis's fiery breath engulfed her, leaving only ashes and a lingering stench of dark magic. The lingering stench of dark magic and burned stone hung heavy in the air, a final foul breath from the vanquished Seraphina. Ignis stood magnificent and terrible, its obsidian scales gleaming in the faint dawn light filtering through the still broken ceiling. The roar had faded to a deep, resonant purr, vibrating through the very foundations of the palace. Alara felt the thrum of that ancient power in her bones, a deep chord struck within her own spirit. She had faced the deepest betrayal and the gravest threat. Now only silence, in the heavy weight of victory, remained. Prince Kalen stumbled forward, his fine tunic torn and smudged with ash, his face pale and drawn. He had watched Seraphina's end, the fiery judgment delivered with an ancient power he could never have comprehended. His eyes, once so filled with cold resolve during her trial, now held a haunted, hollow look. He dropped to one knee before Alara, not in reverence but in abject defeat, his head bowed low. The cold stone pressed against his knees, a sharp reminder of his own fallen stature. He could still hear the echo of Seraphina's shrieks, a sound that would forever chase him through his dreams. A tremor ran through his hands, and he clenched them into fists, trying to find some semblance of control. Lara, Kalen's voice was a rough whisper, barely audible above the low growl Ignis still emitted. He lifted his head slightly, those gray eyes, once so commanding, now filled with a desperate plea. I, I was a fool. The words tasted like ash in his mouth, bitter and utterly true. He felt the eyes of the few remaining guards, the servants who had watched the battle, all fixed upon him, their expressions a mix of fear and dawning understanding. Each gaze was a fresh wound. Alara looked down at him, her golden eyes still alight with draconic energy, held no pity, only a quiet, weary knowledge. The image of him turning away in the dungeon, his words condemning her in the courtroom, flashed through her mind. That pain, once so crushing, now felt distant, a scar rather than a fresh wound. A fool, perhaps, she said, her voice clear and carrying, unlike the trembling servant she once was. But ambition made you a betrayer. She saw his jaw clench, a fresh wave of shame washing over his face. He flinched, as if struck. Seraphina, she twisted my fears, Kalen continued, his voice gaining a fragile strength, as if confessing aloud was a necessary penance. He looked up at Alara, then around at the devastated courtroom, the lingering destruction echoing his own internal ruin. She whispered of fading dragon power, of our kingdom's decline. She convinced me that you were a threat, that your bond with the dragons weakened them, that your simple presence drew their life force away. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. I wanted to believe her, wanted to find an easy answer, a scapegoat. He paused, taking a ragged breath. And when the chains broke, when Ignis appeared, I saw my entire world crumble. He straightened, rising slowly to his feet, but kept his head bowed, unable to meet her gaze directly. There is no excuse for what I did, no defense for abandoning you, for condemning you based on lies. I was weak, I was afraid, and I betrayed the one person who truly believed in me, who stood by me. He finally met her eyes, a raw, naked honesty in his gaze. I accept whatever judgment you pass. I am ready to face the consequences for my actions, for the choices I made, for the pain I caused. His words were not just for Alara. They were for the silent onlookers, for the kingdom, for his own fractured conscience. He felt the chill of the morning air and the even colder certainty of his disgraced future. The crowd stirred, murmuring like a disturbed hive. They had seen his testimony, his cold pronouncement of guilt. Now they heard his confession, raw and unfiltered. They saw the former prince, stripped of his arrogance, humbled before the maid he had condemned. Alara studied him for a long moment, the scent of his fear almost palpable. She saw not the charming prince nor the cruel judge, but a broken man finally stripped of his delusions. Ignis lowered its head slightly, its golden eyes fixed on Kalen, as if assessing his sincerity. A soft, rumbling sound resonated from its chest. Your confession is heard, Kalen Thorne, Ilara declared, her voice resonating with an authority that had been forged in fire and betrayal. But judgment belongs to the kingdom, to the people you swore to protect. She knew her words carried immense weight, and she felt the burden of that power settling onto her shoulders. She looked out at the faces of the people, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear, hope and uncertainty. They needed not just a leader, but a symbol of a new way. The next few days were a blur of intense activity, a whirlwind of rebuilding and rethinking. Kalen, true to his word, stood before the hastily assembled court, his voice firm despite its underlying tremor, and laid bare Seraphina's manipulative schemes, detailing how she had played on his insecurities and ambitions. He spoke of her whispers of ancient prophecies and hidden powers, all designed to make him turn on Alara. He recounted the fabrications, the false evidence, the cruel twists of truth that had led to Alara's wrongful accusation. He did not spare himself, recounting his own weakness, his fear of losing his position, his desperate need for an easy answer to the kingdom's woes. The shame was a physical ache in his chest, a constant pressure. His public confession sent shockwaves through Eldoria. Whispers turned to shouts, anger to understanding, as the truth of Seraphina's reign of terror became undeniably clear. Kalen, stripped of his princely titles and exiled from the royal palace, was allowed to remain within the city walls, living as a common citizen, his future uncertain but his conscience, perhaps a little lighter. He would spend his days quietly serving the community, a constant living reminder of the dangers of ambition and fear. He felt the rough texture of the common clothes against his skin, the unfamiliar weight of true anonymity. His hands, once accustomed to the soft feel of fine fabrics, now grew calloused from honest labor. With Seraphina's dark influence removed and Kalen's confession echoing through the land, Alara stood before her people. The grand courtroom had been partially repaired, a temporary canopy stretching over the shattered roof, but the scars of the past remained visible. Ignis, ever present, coiled majestically behind her, its immense form a silent guardian. The air was thick with expectation, the scent of wood smoke and damp earth from the damaged structure mingling with the eager breath of the crowd. For too long, Alara began, her voice steady and clear, carrying effortlessly through the hushed hall. The truth of our bond with the dragons, the very heart of Eldoria, has been distorted, hidden, and used for selfish gain. She paused, letting her gaze sweep over the multitude of faces, each one reflecting a part of the kingdom's hope and fear. Her sunstone brooch pulsed with a soft golden light against her chest, a warm weight over her heart. She felt a deep connection to every person there, a responsibility that settled firmly within her. "My name is Alara Vance," she continued, "and though I was born a servant, my blood holds an ancient lineage, a legacy connected to the very first dragon riders, the true guardians of this realm." As she spoke, the sunstone brooch flared, and a shimmering image of a majestic, ancient dragon, its form like polished obsidian, briefly appeared in the air above her, its eyes burning with molten gold. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. This was not just a story, it was a revelation, made manifest before their very eyes. Ignis let out a low, resonant rumble, a sound of ancient affirmation. This kingdom was founded on a sacred pact, a partnership between humans and dragons, Alara declared, her voice imbued with a new, powerful resonance. My ancestors, believed lost to time, carried the key to this bond, a connection that Seraphina sought to sever forever. She spoke of the ancient ways, of balance and respect, of the deep wisdom the dragons offered. She spoke not of power but of harmony, not of conquest but of unity. She painted a picture of a future where dragons were not just beasts of war, but revered companions, integral to the kingdom's flourishing. The very air around her seemed to shimmer with her conviction. "I am not a queen by birthright, but by the will of the dragons, and by the trust you place in me, friend," Alara stated, her eyes shining with unwavering resolve. "I pledge to restore the balance, to rebuild Eldoria not just in stone, but in spirit. We will forge a new path, one where justice reigns, where integrity is valued, and where the ancient bond with our dragon companions is honored above all else." The cheers that erupted then were thunderous, shaking the very foundations of the palace. They were cheers not just for a new leader, but for a new era, a whispered promise of hope after years of fear. She felt the warmth of their belief, a powerful current of energy flowing into her. Alara knew that words alone were not enough. Action was required. She immediately set about establishing a new governing council, one that reflected the true diversity of Eldoria. She selected individuals not for their noble birth or political maneuvering, but for their wisdom, integrity, and genuine commitment to the kingdom's well-being. She included representatives from the common folk, from various trades and villages, and crucially, from the scattered communities of dragonkin, those who had always maintained a quiet, respectful connection to the great beasts. The council meetings, initially tense with suspicion and old rivalries, gradually began to foster a spirit of collaboration. The scent of parchment and ink filled the newly organized chambers. Ignis, though not a direct council member, was a constant, powerful presence. Its deep telepathic insights often cut through human squabbles, offering a perspective rooted in millennia of wisdom. The dragon's presence alone brought a sense of awe and responsibility to the council's deliberations. Alara often found herself mediating between differing human viewpoints, then turning to Ignis for its ancient, unbiased counsel. The vast difference in perspective often brought surprising clarity. The rebuilding of Eldoria began with earnest. The damaged parts of the palace were not just repaired, but redesigned, incorporating elements of dragon lore and natural beauty. Gone were the oppressive, heavy decorations that spoke of rigid power. In their place arose open spaces, flowing lines, and natural light. Gardens were revitalized, and new structures were built to accommodate the increasing interaction between humans and their dragon companions. Dragon sanctuaries were established, not as prisons, but as places of refuge and healing, where the great creatures could thrive and their bonds with humans could be nurtured. The sounds of hammers and saws filled the air, a melody of progress. Alara oversaw the implementation of sweeping reforms. Laws were enacted to protect both humans and dragons, ensuring fairness and preventing the abuses of power that had plagued the previous regime. Education became a cornerstone, teaching the true history of Eldoria, emphasizing the importance of the dragon bond and fostering understanding and empathy across all walks of life. Children learned not to fear the dragons, but to respect and admire them, often visiting the sanctuaries to see the magnificent creatures up close. The air filled with the excited chatter of young voices and the gentle huffs of nearby dragons. One particularly poignant moment occurred when Alara, accompanied by Ignis, visited the old dungeon where she had been held captive. The cold, damp air still clung to the stone, a ghost of her past suffering. She ran her hand over the rough wall where she had etched the days of her imprisonment. But instead of sadness, she felt a quiet strength. This place, once a symbol of her despair, was now a testament to her resilience. She decreed that the dungeon would be transformed into a center for justice, a place where fair trials would be held and truth would be sought, its dark history serving as a constant reminder of what had been overcome. The lingering scent of decay was gradually replaced by the fresh smell of clean stone and hope. Weeks turned into months, and Eldoria slowly, steadily transformed. The once strained relationship between humans and dragons blossomed into a harmonious partnership. Farmers sought the wisdom of earthbound dragons for their crops, and merchants utilized the swiftness of sky dwellers for trade. Dragon riders, now truly bonded partners rather than mere handlers, became revered figures, symbols of Eldoria's renewed spirit. The sound of dragon wings soaring overhead became a common, reassuring presence, no longer a herald of war or distant conflict. Alara, now formally recognized as the Dragon Empress, rarely sat on a throne. She preferred to walk among her people, to listen to their concerns, to feel the pulse of the kingdom with her own hands. Her chestnut hair, still often braided, now held the occasional glimmer of gold, a subtle testament to the draconic energy that flowed through her veins. Her blue eyes, once downcast, now shone with wisdom and unwavering compassion. She still felt the weight of responsibility, the echoes of her past pain, but also an immense gratitude for the path she had been given. One evening, Alara stood on a newly constructed balcony, high within the palace walls, Ignis coiled comfortably behind her. The cool night air caressed her face, carrying the gentle sounds of a thriving city below. She could see the soft glow of countless hearths, the flicker of lanterns in the streets, and the distant, majestic outlines of dragons perched on the highest peaks, their forms silhouetted against the starlit sky. The scent of night-blooming jasmine drifted up from the gardens, mixing with the faint, comforting aroma of wood smoke. Eldoria was no longer a place of fear and intrigue. It was a beacon of harmony, a testament to what could be achieved when trust and truth prevailed over ambition and deceit. She thought of Kaelin, now a quiet, respected artisan in the lower city, who had found a measure of peace and atonement. She thought of Seraphina, her dark legacy consumed by fire. She thought of the little maid who had once polished the prince's boots, never dreaming of the power that lay dormant within her. Ignis nudged her gently with its massive head, a soft, rumbling sound reverberating through her. She reached up, her small hand resting against its warm, scaly cheek. The bond between them was a living, breathing thing, an unbreakable connection forged in fire and destiny. She felt the vastness of Ignis's ancient wisdom, the quiet strength that flowed from it into her. The kingdom was not perfect, no place ever was, but it was honest, striving, and filled with a hope she had helped to ignite. This was her legacy, her truth, her kingdom. The sunstone brooch on Alara's chest glowed steadily, a testament to the enduring bond between her, Ignis, and the reawakened spirit of Eldoria, forever changing the kingdom's fate. What would you have done? One line in the comments. Let's argue it out together. Where did the story catch you? Which scene made you stop and think? A small like is a small move, but it's a big support for this channel. See you in the next story. Subscribe so you don't miss it.